This is our last big session, and we have learned a lot, and we will continue to learn. We were also thankful for the devotionals that we had to reflect upon God's grace and His lessons that He have been sharing with us. Let me just get it back. I've just been trying to see where I can put this right. Nice. Yeah, so I have for us this morning some lessons from the garden that we can learn from our garden as we venture out and as we plant and as we stay in the garden. Because the garden actually is our first home. It is our first work, and it is our first lesson book. It's our first school, the garden, and so there are lessons from it. Genesis 2:8 says, "And God placed man in the garden." So we were placed first in the garden. That was our home. And it was also a place of work. And the Lord took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to keep it. So the garden really has some lessons for us. It's a type. And three types I'd like to share with you as we look at the garden. And the first is that it's a building up environment. And building up doesn't only relate to architecture, but also to agriculture. And so that's what we're trying to do once we put that seed in the ground, is seeing that it's built up into beautiful plants and to give us the produce that we need. But we need to be mindful of the environment that as we have been told and taught, that we are placing any seed in, because some plants grow better in some types of soil and others in other types of soil. But all plants, as we have learned, will need some basics. They'll need somewhere where they'll be able to absorb the water and the nutrients and the oxygen. And so it is with God when He was planting us in the Garden of Eden, that first year, He made sure that it was the best environment for us to grow, the best environment for us to build up family and the oneness that we needed. That He made sure that we had the basics that we needed for growth. We had the water. There were 4 lovely rivers still beside the Tigris and the Euphrates, running through the garden. He made sure we had the nutrition, the nuts and the grains. He made sure that we had the oxygen, the beautiful air from the trees and the area. He made sure that we had the sunlight, and more so the sun's light. In the cool of the day, the Lord will come down and just discuss with us. So the garden is a type of building up environment where we can be built up as we spend our time in the garden. Building up plants, we too can reflect and we being built up as human beings. The garden is a type of teacher. It teaches us patience. Much of our garden, as we go there, is about waiting. From the time we put that first seed in the ground, we have to wait 3 days, 4 days, 8 to see it just shoot. And then we wait a little longer and it begins to bloom, and then yet a little longer and we see signs of the fruit being set, and then we wait a little longer and then we can have the harvest. And so God somehow made the garden to teach us certain lessons in life. We can put forth in our gardens all the effort to make sure that it has the right thing, the right soils, it gets the water, the oxygen, the nutrients that it needs, but we have to have the faith and the patience to wait, because we can't do anything for the plant to grow. We give it all it needs, the water. We're not so sure it's going to shoot. We're not so sure it's going to send out that first sight of fruit, and that we're going to have that harvest. We have to depend on the work of God. The seed faith is in the hands of God, and so it is with our own faith when we come to Christ, and He's the one who nurtures our faith. We have to make sure that we do all that's necessary, humanly necessary. We read the Bibles, we pray, we tell others about Jesus. You know, we put in all that we can put in, but for that faith to grow, it's all God's department. We need to leave it in His hands. And that's why James can say, knowing this, that the type that the trying of our faith work at patience, but let patience have a perfect work in you, that you may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. So for us, just as a plant to grow up and have fruits of itself, we need to depend solely on God. So nature, the garden teaches us that God will bless the results of our hands as we plant. And just so He'll make sure that we get results from our own life, we will produce according to His desire. And finally, the garden is a type of refuge. Just as how in our gardens we try to remove the weeds from the plant, we try to remove anything that will harm our plants from giving us the produce that we need, just so we can repair to the garden. It's a type of removing from the world, from all these days, particularly right around the world, not only here home in Trinidad, but the political infighting, from the conspiracy theory, what's really going on with our world. Everybody have something to say about our realities, but we can repair, we can go to our gardens and find there some remove from it all. And more than that, in our gardens, we can be able to listen to the best voice of all. We can stop and listen to the voice of God. And so the garden is a place of remove, of a place of refuge that we can run to. We can sing when we go and understand we can come to the garden alone as we go in and plant each day. And we can be able to reflect on God and grow up in Him. And so as we go through this session today, I want us just to focus and sit back and just listen and reflect upon this song about coming to the garden alone by Austin Miles, after which I'll pray.
I can't hear anything. We are not hearing anything.
Okay, let me just see. I guess probably we didn't all hear that, did we?
No, we didn't hear a thing.
Oh boy.
Just heard your voice.
Not even the last part?
No,
A little whisper.
we didn't hear the song. We didn't hear.
Just the guitar. Just the guitar we heard.
Oh wow. Oh wow. Yeah.
I'm trying to get back onto my
Make sure you tick off the optimize sound icon at the bottom of your share screen. The sound. Make sure you tick off your sound.
of the mic.
Your mic as well as on the share screen, the two icons below the screen at the bottom. Make sure you tick those off.
On the shared screen.
Okay.
I think we should just pray and go forward.
Yeah, yes, I think we should now. Yeah, sorry about that, but we should just pray. So let's pray. Oh, Father, we are so thankful for your love and mercy. Thankful, Lord, for the privilege that we can come to you, get away from the world. And as we plant in our gardens, not only that we can plant so we can have enough to sustain us and our families and to share with our neighbors and even to bring us some income for those of us. But while we are there, Lord, we could still take the opportunity to reflect upon you and come to know you and grow closer in a deeper relationship with you. So bless, Lord, as we go through this day, that we're not just learning about life here, but we're learning about the life hereafter. Through this program is our prayer. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen, Pastor. That's another wonderful message we had today. We were reminded again that the garden was our first home, our first lesson book. Such a powerful message, and we were reminded of three major things: that the garden is a type of building up of environment, a type of teacher, and a type of refuge. As we continue this week and we continue to work in our gardens, let us continue to reflect and to think upon the goodness of God and his nature and the garden that he gave us. All right? So again, thank you, Pastor Clark, and thank you for such a wonderful message. All right, this morning, we were supposed to have two speakers. I'm only seeing one with us this morning, but we are very happy this morning to have Brother Andell Edwards. Brother Edwards is one of our PhD students at the University of the West Indies, and he's doing a PhD in livestock science. He's also a lecturer at UTT, the University of Trinidad and Tobago. This morning I invited him to talk about, sometimes we think because we have crops in our yard, we don't need any livestock, all right? And we think about Cain and Abel and how both of them were at loggerheads with each other. You can't have plants if you have animals, we tend to think that. But this morning I invited Brother Edwards to talk to us about livestock that we could have. We could sometimes think about doing our own eggs, right? Free range eggs. Or we could do, we don't really preach a message of eating meat, right? We are, most of us are vegetarians, at least we are supposed to be, all right? But we need that source of protein sometimes, all right? So, Brother Edwards, I will turn over to you this morning, and you will enlighten us on how best we could have some livestock in our gardens. All right?
All right. Thank you, Dr. Isaac. Pastor Clark, thank you for that profound devotion. Thank you for all the participants that joined in this morning. I feel a bit humbled and even honored to be part of this, what seemed to have been an intriguing and exciting, very informative lecture series My apologies though for not being here sooner. With the pandemic, I had to be at work on a Sunday morning, and so that proved a challenge, but I'm happy that you were gathering a whole lot. All right. I hope that you could see my screen in the back. Are you able to see my screen? Yes, you could just raise your hands or send a thumbs up if you
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
we see.
you're so impressed. Yes. I want to apologize also when Dr. Isaac would have first informed me about this and asked me. I said yes, and I forgot to ask her, well, what kind of small livestock do you want me to touch on? Luckily, because of the audience, I know that we are not into ducks and rabbits and those type of small livestock, so that brought some relief. What I will do, though, given our time, I'm going to look into poultry first of all. We're going to look at the meat birds, meat producing birds, and the egg producing birds. And then we're going to go quickly into sheep and goats and see how we can get through this morning's session. So what I'll do in the interest of time and sometimes the internet being such a challenge, we're going to delve into the poultry. I'm going to bring some introductory stuff, some basics, and then I'm going to feed some questions after that. And then we further go into our small ruminant animals. Okay? We all right with that? Right. And so when we are first going to have chickens, I want to inform you that we don't have breeder farms here in Trinidad, meaning the farms that actually have birds coming together to fertilize an egg to produce eggs for hatching. That is both laying birds, which we call layers, and broilers. We don't have breeder farms here, so we import all of our eggs to the hatchery. All right, so that's one thing. We have birds in our yard. Some of us have what we call yard fowl or common fowl. Where we come from, where I come from in Tobago, we say yardie, yard fowl. You would have cockerels mating with birds and giving you eggs. But the more large scale production, people would usually, we import all of our eggs. What we do have in Trinidad are hatcheries. Hatcheries are the places where the eggs are hatched out and the chicks are sold to different buyers. All right. So we have people like Arawak, for instance. You would know one of the major chicken companies in Trinidad. They import thousands and thousands of eggs because they're into the business of production. All right. So when we get the birds, when we get chickens, or we go out to buy chickens, all right, and for backyard use, you could go and purchase 20 chickens, 50 chickens, up to you. You could go and purchase chickens from your local agro supply stores or depots, all right? We get what we call day-old chickens, all right? Meaning they just hatch out and they start distributing them, all right? When they hatch out, sometimes we do, or the hatchery is gonna do vaccinations for some of the more common diseases like Newcastle and Marek's diseases. Those are common diseases that we would find in our poultry. And so they are vaccinated against those diseases at the hatchery so that you don't have to, as a grower or a producer, you don't have to worry about those vaccines. All right, so we get the day-old chicks. The thing about getting our day-old chicks is that we are supposed to brood those chicks, meaning that they are here, they can't control the temperature, all right? They don't know a thing, they're just into this world. And like babies, you have to take care of those babies because if we don't, we're gonna have a lot of mortality, or mortality in that sense mean deaths. So you can't spend your money, $8, $7 for a chicken, and then just allow all your chickens to die. So they have to undergo a process where we refer to as brooding, all right? And so that brooding, your chickens, is where we're going to provide an environment. Particularly the key thing is that supplemental heat. In that first week, if we are rearing what we call the meat birds, because I would tell you, our meat birds, we wear them for just 5 to 6 weeks. And then they are all for hands. They go for meat, for slaughter or distribution.
You finished? Right, just go with that.
All right, that was a question. I heard some feedback there. I guess somebody's the mic was on. So for our meat birds, we're going to have 1 to 2 weeks where we look at their brooding period, and for your laying birds, that is going to stay with you for a lot longer time. You have about 3 to 4 weeks, so that brooding period. It's amazing. You would not know, but a chicken, when hatched, could go to 2 to 3 days without feed because that embryo, that chick that hatched out of that embryo, has enough nutrients to take it for 2 to 3 days without consuming any food. And that is why the egg is so potent, all right? And that is why a long time, you know, guys who in the gym and they're building muscles, etc., you would find that they used to crack a raw egg and make a blend and drink just like that, because the egg tends to be very potent. And so it begs the question, how is it that that chick could survive 2 to 3 days without feed, all right, just hatching from that egg? So in the brooder, a brooder is really a nice little box that we create for our chickens or day-old chickens, so that the chickens are placed in a box about 3 feet high. It could be 4 feet to 5 feet in length, 3 feet or 4 feet in width. The key, and that is depending on how many chicks that you're gonna purchase. But the trick is to create an environment where there's no draft, that maintains a certain temperature to help your bird survive through that brooding period. And so brooding naturally would have come from your hen. So for those of you who have yardie or chickens in the yard, and sometimes when they hatch out, you would normally see the chicks at certain times of the day under the wings of the hen. And she's providing what we call that nice warmth, all right? And that is why we call her a broody hen. And so brooding would have come from that whole process, that brooding process, all right? So you could have it done naturally, but because of the time we're living in and we are self-interested beings, and because of increased production and thinking about animal protein for the world's sustenance, we can't depend on natural brooding. And so we have to come up with brooding conditions that could house or help us brood a lot more birds within a short space of time, all right? So as the chickens grow, and the reason for the brooding, as I would have indicated earlier, is that the chickens, they are not born with feathers. They have a nice little fur coat and they can't regulate their temperature. And so the regulation of their temperature comes by your intervention, all right? When you have a brooder, or if you build a brooder, your brooder could be made out of board, metal sheetings, all right, scrap things around the yard. You also need, because we're doing backyard stuff and we're doing small numbers, something that we refer to as an extension cord. And a lot of you have it in your yards, in the garage, an extension cord with a nice bulb attached to the end. And what that does, you must have an electric source where you could plug in that bulb, sometimes a 100-watt bulb, or there are some places that sell what we call infrared bulbs. That extension cord should be able to be extended or right over in the middle of that box, and you must be able to adjust that bulb at any given time of the day. All right, so you have your extension cord long enough to be able to plug into a source, an electric source or socket, but you must have enough length to adjust that bulb, whether higher or lower, and I'm going to tell you why we need that in a little bit. So in the brooder, you want to make sure that it's fresh, it's clean, fresh, clean water is available, all right, and feed at all times. So the temperature in the brooder is critical. As I said, your birds don't pull a cover over them or a sheet, all right, or put on a sweater, and you have to make sure that you provide that within the brooder. The reason why you're supposed to be able to adjust that bulb is because the birds within your brooder, the chickens within your brooder, is going to tell you by their behavior what is going on with their temperature, all right? Some people will usually get a thermometer, and they maybe a mercury one or a digital one, and they place it inside the pen in the litter that we would speak to in a little bit. to really gauge the temperature within the brooder, but the chickens themselves are going to tell you what is going on. All right, that is why if you have your chickens and this is your brooder, for example, if you look right ahead, if you look at the screen, if your birds are moving away, they are running to the edges like this, it's because, and this is your light source, this red dot that you're seeing in the center here is your light source, that which you hang over the box, and you have to adjust accordingly. This light, if your chickens are running to the corner like this, it means that the temperature is too hot. All right, they're saying, whoa, what's going on there? You know, who light that fire in the middle there? All right, and so they are running to the edges because they are getting away from the heat source. All right, if you find them running towards the heat source and they are chirping loudly, meaning that they are sending out a distress signal, it's because that the temperature is not right. It's too cold. And so they are moving towards the heat source. All right. If you find them huddling on each other like that in one corner, it means that there's a draft coming in somewhere. All right. Meaning some kind of wind, cold chill is coming in and they're moving together. They're huddling. And this is dangerous because when they do that, they form a stampede, they could trample on each other and cause death, all right? But when you see them like this, evenly distributed, not making any noise, this shows that they are content, the temperature is just right, and everything is all right, all right? And so being able to adjust the temperature, you must be able to observe the birds within your brooding area. So it means that a couple times during the day, you need to just take a walk, take a peek, and it gives you an indication of what's going on in the house, in your brooder, sorry, with respect to the temperature, all right? So now that we want to set up the brooder, we want to make sure that we prepare for the chicks so that you're not going to buy the chicks and when you reach up, say, oh gosh, what to do now, boy? Oh, no, you can't do that. Just like how you could get stressed out and you could get flustered when things are all over the place, you have to make sure that you bring birds into a nice, properly prepared setting because you stress them out by just traveling with them in the first place. So you go to let them at the hatchery, all right? That movement from the hatchery to your home, all right, is going to provide some level of stress. And so you want to make sure that when the birds reach, they could distress as quickly as possible, all right? Also, when you're purchasing your chicks at the hatchery, all right, or you go to the agro store, you want to make sure that you travel with birds very early in the morning or in the late evening and the cooler times of the day, except you have your air-conditioned vehicle and you want to have them in the AC, in the air-conditioned unit, all right? But they must be as comfortable as possible as you traverse the roads, all right? So you want to make sure that the brooder is properly cleaned and disinfected, all right? And disinfected is important because you have microorganisms and vectors that could really prove a challenge for you if you don't take care of them and you expose your baby chicks to these organisms. But you don't want to do it the day that you're going to collect the chicks. No, you want to make sure that the area is prepared and dried a couple days before so that your chicks could come into a well-prepared environment. You want to cover the floor with litter, and so we use wood shavings and sawdust, shredded paper, all right? Those are some of the things you could use as a dry litter to really absorb the moisture and also create that warm, snuggly environment, all right? You want to also, when your birds are going to arrive, you want to have fresh water available because the first thing that you would try to have them do after traveling is drink. They're going to drink some water, all right? But you want to also, if possible, get a nice little vitamin in that water to really boost them because they're going to drink and because they're stressed, all right, to really help with those kind of situations. So clean water, a little vitamin in the water, all right, for a couple of days or maybe about 3 days to make sure that you reduce mortality to a large extent. Newspapers, those newspapers, the Express and the Guardian and the Newsday that you throw out, that you don't have stored, well, most of us don't store those newspapers and we just throw them in the bin. Those newspapers could be used to spread on the floor of the brooder, all right? So the chickens are rest on the newspaper. And that is to prevent the chickens, because at that stage, they're very curious, all right? Sometimes the sawdust is gonna look like the feed and they tend to pick a lot at the sawdust. And so that gets in the system and it doesn't do anything for them. It fills up the system, all right? And they are unable to eat their food and digest their food properly. So that newspaper creates that or prevents them from picking at that feed, and also to have them get accustomed to eating. Sometimes a little feed is spread on the newspaper, all right? And so after 3 days or so, you could remove the newspaper and then they're in the litter and they're getting about life as they should, all right? Young time, before we had what we call waterers, so that some of you who, if you go to your school gardens, or for some of you who are into teaching, or if you know people who rear animals, or if you go to agro stores because you go there to buy your stuff for planting, etc., you would notice that there's a nice 1 gallon looking waterer, and the base can be yellow, red, black, all right? Those are what you're gonna use for providing water for your chickens. It's a more advanced to what we used long time. Long time we used to have old pans and trays that we could put water in. The challenge with those ice cream containers or the different things that we're going to use to provide water is that the chickens could get in there and they would drown. All right? So that if you're going to use large base, because some of us are creative, what we would want to do is put a nice large rock or wood at the center of that base, or that whatever you're going to put that water in, so that you limit the area in which the chickens could go in for a swim. All right? So you prevent that so that they're able to get their water from around the rims of the pan that you're using. So it prevents them from getting in and drowning or getting themselves wet, all right? And they could get cold and they start to shiver. And if you don't dry them in time, they could die, all right? What that water is going to do also is save you the time in which you have to always be emptying a waterer or picking up water, because the chickens are going to throw their sawdust in there, they're going to scratch, all right? And so it helps you it saves you a lot of work if you get one of those plastic waterers, all right? Dishes also, flat dishes could be used for feeding in the first couple of days, first week, all right? But what you would want to do as the chickens grow, you want to attach them to what we call a feed hopper, all right? And the hopper is really, it has an open base, it has a base, sorry, and it has a cylindrical covering around it. You pour the feed inside, and as the chickens eat, you're gonna have the feed going down as soon as the level of the feed is removed at the base. Why you want a feed hopper hanging, all right, is because you don't want to have your hoppers on the ground for the lifetime of your chickens. Chickens tend to scratch by nature, all right? They like to forage, they like to scratch, and they like to pick and swivel their heads around. And what is going to happen if you have a feed on the ground, you're going to have a lot of wastage of your feed, all right? So what you would want to do is have a hopper that you could adjust to the height of the back of the birds. So as the birds grow, all right, you raise the hopper so you don't have that scratching and the wasting of the feed. And in the case of our broilers or meat birds that we're going to get to eventually, some have argued that their breast muscle, all right, tends to develop. You tend to have better breast muscling for birds that really are picking above their usual height, all right? So you want to have hoppers that you could adjust from the roof of your pen or your coop, all right? Are we there? Everybody still there? We are following?
Yes, we are.
Nice. Right.
Yes, we are.
What some persons would do is as the birds arrive, some gonna dip the beak of the chickens in the water so that it gives them an idea of drinking. All right. You just want to get 10% of those birds to dip so that once they see 1 or 2 chicks drinking at the fountain, everybody else going to follow. It's like a kind of copycat, all right? So you get your birds, you could get your birds drinking by dipping the beaks in the water, all right? I'm seeing that I have a raised hand there. All right, Miss Orr, that is. All right, I guess she has since changed her mind. Right. Right, so we spoke about that. Right, when we have our chicks though, because we are thinking about a small space, chickens could get stressed out by being overcrowded. All right, you tend to see a lot of things when things are in a small space and they don't have enough room, everything is up in their grill. All right, it could be frustrating, but what it does, it causes some birds to outperform the others, and you tend to have no uniformity in your flock. Because what is going to happen if you have overcrowding? Overcrowding, especially in your laying birds, can lead to what we call cannibalism. Yes, the birds could pick at each other. They get curious, and when they pick and they see red and they see blood, they don't stop. They keep picking away or pecking away, and then you could have death as a result. So overcrowding could cause that. What it also does is that when you feed, you have some birds being able to get feed while others have to wait for the dregs, or if anything is left over, any at all right? And so if they're not getting to consume, if it's always a battle to consume the feeds made available, again, some people, the rich is going to get rich in this case, and the poor is going to get poor. And so proper spacing is critical. What we do, or a rule of thumb that I would use for my students, for your meat birds, 1 square foot per bird, all right? You could use that. Some people go 0.75 square foot per bird. So for instance, if you have a 10 by 10 space, 10 feet by 10 feet, all right, that is 100 square foot. All right, if you divide that by 1 square foot, you could have 100 birds properly placed, all right, in that area. All right, so I hope you follow that. For your laying birds, the spacing is a bit more. You could go 2 to 2.5 square foot per bird, all right, which gives that proper stocking density in terms of rearing your poultry animals, all right? Okay, so that in this, well, this slide, these presentations could be made available to you, so that I hope people are not scratching and trying to write quickly as we go forward, all right? But again, you would find that this spacing is going to take care of your birds that you are going to keep for a lot longer than 5 and 6 weeks, all right? You would notice that the feeder space is going to increase as your birds get older. The drinking space is going to increase, all right? The floor space per bird, all right, is going to decrease because the birds are going to get bigger. They're going to put on more mass, and so they would want that room. They would want more room in this event, all right? Let me go to feeding, and I would go quickly, because of time, I would go quickly into the 2 species of birds and how we feed them. Your birds, in order for your birds to grow quickly, all right, I'll touch on the meat birds first of all. They are supposed to be fed, or they have certain requirements according to their physiological state, or in English, their stage of development, all right? So there are 3 feeding phases, or we could limit it to 2 for your broilers or your meat birds, all right? They ought to be fed what we call a starter ration, all right? So when you go, you would find in any of the feed stuff, you'll have what they call broiler starter. The cost of your starter is going to differ depending on which company is producing it, all right? And it goes for broiler starter and what we call broiler finisher, all right? There's also a feed that is called the grower, all right? But we are looking at 6 weeks, and we are asking ourselves, how are we going to feed for that 6 weeks? When we're feeding broilers, for the first 3 weeks, if we're using just starter and finisher, for the first 3 weeks, we feed what we call a broiler starter ration. A nice crumble, so that your chickens are able to pick at it and they're able to utilize it quite efficiently. And then after, when you're going on to that fourth week, all right, within that third and fourth week, you're gradually changing into what we call the broiler finisher. It's a heavier pellet, it's longer, but you have to transition the feed, meaning you don't just wake up one morning and just start to give the birds finisher, all right? That is going to cause problems. It's going to throw off their eating. You're going to have problems in terms of weight gain, etc. So you have to gradually introduce them. So what you do, you mix the feed, say for the first day, you're going to change it. You're going to use 75% of your starter ration and mix 25% of your finisher, all right? Give that for 2 days, and for the day after, you're going to go 50-50 until you fully go into the finisher feed. That is one way that people are going to feed their broilers. Some people, for the first 2 weeks, they use the starter. For the following 2 weeks, they use a grower feed. And for the final 2 weeks, they use what we call a finisher feed. And so these are, the thing about these feeds, they have been prepared by the manufacturers to meet the nutrient requirement of your birds at those stages of development. The thing about it though, for people who are not into getting their birds off quickly to the market, and let me put in though, for some people, they have said that the birds grow so quickly because they pump them up with all kind of chemicals and they inject them with different things. For the most part, that isn't truth. For the mere fact that the poultry industry have been light years ahead of all the other livestock industries because they have put their monies where their mouths are. They have invested in a lot of research, breeding, so that you would find that the poultry industry could feed. They have companies that produce feed. They have mechanized slaughtering facilities. They have ways in which we've moved from a place where these birds would have been produced in 16 weeks to get 5 to 6 pounds. They moved to 12 weeks. Then they went to 8 weeks. Now we're at 6 weeks. And in some cases, some birds are now getting birds at 4 weeks, between 4 and 5 weeks, up at 5 pounds. And it's because they have been doing a lot of breeding. They have been looking at genetics of birds and they have been breeding for heavier breasts, bigger thighs, all right? And it's because there are a group of birds out there with the fast growth rate, etc. And they have been breeding, putting breeds together, getting their offspring, that whole genetics that they've been working with. And so that is what gives your birds the ability to grow fast and put on weight. But your nutrition though is critical. So they have the genetic potential to grow fast, but if you don't provide the right nutrition, that is not going to happen. So you would find that the meat birds, those are the white chickens that we see, and those that some of you eat at KFC and churches, etc. Those are the meat birds, the broiler birds. You would find that some people grow them in their yard and they take a lot longer to grow faster because they're not using the diets created by the companies. Some people, you could use rice. People use sweet potato, boiled dasheen, all right, to provide that energy. And once you have birds scavenging, meaning that they're going out there and they're digging for their earthworms and they're foraging, they're going to get some nutrients from there, and you could supplement it with your liquor scraps, your sweet potato, your rice. Some people use some crack corn because they're not in a hurry. They're growing for their own home use, and you could get birds growing, but they would not grow as quickly and gain weight as quickly as if you use the commercial feeds prepared for them, all right? So that those are the ways in which you're gonna feed your broiler birds to get them ready for market in 5 to 6 weeks. For your laying birds, those layers, the brown ones
Imagine that, Saints.
The brown ones that you're gonna see, those that, and in some cases they can be black, those that you see producing eggs, you feed them, when you get them as chickens, for the first 6 weeks, your birds are gonna be having a starter ration. So you see the mass difference, the difference between the meat and the laying birds. In 6 weeks, those birds are ready for slaughter. All right, they are ready to slaughter and get on the market. But in 6 weeks with your laying birds, they're still on what we call chick starter ration. All right? From 6 weeks to 17 weeks, from the 6th week to the 17th week, these birds are now exposed to what we call grower or pullet developer ration. All right? This is where the body's being prepared to start that egg laying process. And from that 17th week into the 18th week, the birds are fed what we call a laying ration. All right? And the laying ration is fed until death do them part. All right, so that once you reach up to that 18th week, by the 17th week, your bird is going to start laying. You're going to see some small eggs referred to as peewee eggs. All right, so some people are not excited by the peewee eggs, but by the time you see those small eggs, once you start your birds on the laying ration, your birds are going to develop and get into laying in a big way. All right. The thing about your laying birds is, again, they are sensitive to a lot of changes. They are sensitive to stress and other things that could cause them to stop laying. When you'll have laying birds, all right, you don't need a cock or cockerel for eggs. All right, a cockerel is, or cock as you know it, is for fertilizing eggs so that you could get a chicken. All right, a bird, all right, or a chicken or a bird, let's go with bird, or a fowl as you know it, would lay an egg every 24 to 26 hours with proper nutrition, because their system, their reproductive system, have been created that way. All right, so they're born with their eggs. All right, so it's not that eggs tend to develop, they're born with tiny minuscule eggs, and those eggs are what develops and comes out the reproductive tract to produce an egg. So they don't need a cock for an egg to be laid. You need a cock for a fertilized egg. All right, but the table eggs, the eggs that we are accustomed to eating, we don't need a cock for that. And so that is why your layer is going to provide you with that. With the right nutrition, you're going to get an egg every 24 to 26 hours. All right, and then for further classes also, if we have to go advanced down the road, you could get to learn how they're going to do that. All right, and how do you identify whether a bird is laying or not. All right, so that's for a whole nother session. But the key thing is to understand how they are fed at the different stages. All right, and how do you get your eggs every day, and how do you treat with that. All right, so the nutrition is important. And again, for people who are not into so much of the commercial feeds, you still have available your scraps. Remember, energy is critical. For your laying birds, calcium. All right, calcium makes up a major part of the eggs and the eggshells. And to avoid cracking, etc., we usually put a form of calcium together with the feed. All right, so if you go to Mayaro or you go to the beach, there's something that we call chip. So you usually ground that shell and make it available in the feed. So that provides the birds with that added calcium for egg laying. All right, nice. So I know that you're eager there, you're wanting to ask some questions. So let me just treat with the production systems first, and then we go into some questions. So the system in which you could produce your birds, we have the free range system. All right, so the birds outside, we're going to discuss that a little bit. We have the backyard extensive, semi-intensive, and then the intensive. So with the free range, your birds are roaming. They sometimes it's as if they have no home. All right, you could provide basic roofings, because if you have them in your backyard roaming, you could put shades, because at times they would need shelter. They tend to want, especially if you have heavy rains, etc. All right, sometimes it may not be used. They roost in trees. They like to perch. Part of their well-being is being able to be up high and perch and look down on the ground. All right, they nest in the bush. All right, and so remember, for us, when we grow up, in order for you to know if a hen lay, you hear her making the song. All right, cock, 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 melee, melee. All right, and so you run outside quick, because you're trying to get an idea of where that fowl coming from, so that you could go and check out the nest. Yeah, remember those days? And then when you remove the eggs, you want to leave back one, because if you move all those eggs, it's problems, she's not going to lay there anymore, all right? And so they nest in the bush, all right? And then you have them of different species. You have hens, cocks, you have chicks, everybody within that space, all right? So that's your free range. And then the backyard extensive, the poultry, your birds are housed at night, but they are allowed to free range during the day, all right? What you do, some people provide some grain in the morning, some cracked corn or rice, etc., all right? And in the evening time, they provide them with something. And what that does is really just supplement what they would have been eating for the day. Maybe they may not have gotten enough, and that evening and morning feed helps to supplement what they would have missed. All right? All right. Then we have these semi-intensive systems where your birds are allowed to roam, but they are allowed to roam within a confined space. All right? So yes, they are outdoors, but they are confined to a particular area, but there's a coop right there available for sleeping in the night. So if you look at this, all right, you may say, boy, this fence is a bit short, all right, because these birds could fly and go their way. But the idea is they are confined in this space, they are outdoors, enjoying some good sunlight where they get their vitamin D, etc. And then they are able to go inside in the nighttime, or they're able to go inside and do their nesting, etc. All right? And then we have the intensive system where nobody has an opportunity to come outside. And so the normal commercial operations would adopt this system where all birds are inside. The trick about this is that you're able to house a lot more birds, higher density, all right? And the production tends to be a lot better and even increased, all right? So for those people who are thinking about the intensive system, this is a nice little structure you can build for your backyard scenario. The intensive system, though, has about 3 different operational models. You have the deep litter, and deep litter just speaks to having a litter, all right, about 5 to 10 cm, whether of sawdust, dry grass, dry molasses, or dry cane, all right? That is really to absorb some moisture. The birds are on the ground, all right? But again, your spacing is critical, and it's a system that has been used for many, many years. Then you have the slatted floor or cages in which the birds are kept off the ground. They are not in direct contact with their feces, etc. All right, so incidents of things like coccidiosis and things are limited, all right? And then you're able to house more birds, a higher density. But again, the animal rights folks would have an issue with this because they think it's a bit barbaric to have the birds like that, unable to forage, just cooped up in these cages on slatted floors, all right? But it's an option that could be utilized. And then you have the battery cages, in which the people who are into laying birds, it's a good option. You build a lot of cages, people build rabbit cages, they build cages for birds, those pretty birds that we see, the semper, the lovebirds, etc. So the battery cage system, with a system about 2 feet by 3 feet length and about 2 feet high, you could house about 3 birds. The thing about it, if you have your laying birds in these cages, you have to provide a slant so that when the birds lay, it allows the egg to roll outside of the cage. But you also have to provide feeding outside of the cage where the birds could push their head through the wire, feed, and even access water. All right? So those are the systems. So if you look here, you'd see an idea of the battery cage. You have about 3, in this case, about 4 birds in this cell. All right? And as they lay, the eggs roll out and you collect it on the outside. All right? You utilize a lot more space, higher density, but it's an option that you could utilize. This also, for you creative people, they use this system. This is not pegged into the ground. You have your PVC pipes and you could put some wire. You could put also your nice string also over these, and these can be moved every 3 to 4 days, all right, with your birds inside, all right? It's an option that could be utilized. You have to move because you don't want your birds to be nesting in their feces, especially if it's wet, because it could predispose them to what we call diseases, especially from internal parasites and ammonia buildup, etc. All right, so that takes us through the poultry. I want to invite your questions. I know you're there eagerly trying to find out some things. So let's get into that part of the questioning, looking at our poultry that we could rear in our backyards. All right, so if you don't want to unmute your mic, you could also send the questions in the chat so we could deal with that as we go forward.
I'm seeing a question there from Latricia. I don't know if it's a question, but her hand is up. Ms. Bailey?
Yes, please. Good morning. Thank you for taking my question. I have two questions, actually.
Sure.
Now, I have a partner who has some chickens. They're what I like to call semi-free range. So they sometimes come out to forage, but they're mostly in a spacious cage that he has built for them. The question is that when he got them, they were fully grown, and he used to feed them grass and coconut that he would grate for them and feed them on vegetable scraps, etc. The yolk was quite rich, bright orange. And afterwards, he started to feed them with the cracked corn and the feed from the supermarket. And I noticed that the yolk began to pale in color. The question is, was that a change in diet, or was there a vitamin deficiency at that point in time?
All right, so let me treat with that. The yolk, what he was feeding, the yolk tends to be a lot influenced by the diet. All right, there's something that is called xanthophyll. All right, xanthophyll is that substance that you would find you could find it in corn for the most part, that gives that yellow yolk. And so you'd find that some of your birds, as they grow, they tend to have a yellow shank, and their beaks tend to be yellow. But when they start laying, the shank start to look pale, and the beak tend to look pale also. It's no longer that nice, rich yellow. That is because the xanthophyll from the system of the bird, from the shank and the beak, etc., is going into egg laying, and that gives it that nice yellow color. And so corn is the major player in that yellow color. But I noticed you said he used coconut, and what are the other things?
Coconut, cut grass, cooked vegetable scraps.
Right. So what has happened? The change in diet could have influenced a good degree the egg yolk color. It also could be because of that change. There would have been some adjustment to how the birds are utilizing the nutrients being made available. And so you could have a slight change, but if he's using the cracked corn, etc., if he's using the commercial feeds, eventually the yolk is going to get back that color once you have that corn in it. But sometimes when you change feeds, because remember I said the birds are sensitive to a lot of things, noise and things that scare them, and changes in feed, etc. You're going to have a change in production, but once things stabilize, they're going to get back to that place in terms of their production. So you can monitor the eggs, look at what he's feeding, and take a look at the yolk, and you should see some changes once the birds would have settled back into their new diet. Yeah.
Okay, good. The second question, just bear with me. Thank you for being patient with me.
No problem.
The second and final question is, when chickens are laying eggs, sometimes you get these mites that crawl all over you. I don't know. I'm curious as to what is the cause of that, and how could that be prevented?
Right. The materials in which you build the housing and also the surroundings is going to influence a lot of what is going to get into your house. What you need to do, because over time, once you have birds occupying an area, there's a lot of things like those mites and etc. is going to come around. And what you need to do is spray your surroundings and practice what we call proper hygiene in terms of turning your litter, all right? Turning your litter, cleaning your nest boxes where the birds would nest from time to time. Look at if you use wood, for most times, sometimes things get into the wood and they start coming into the nest. They get on your birds themselves also. So what you need to do is there's something that you could do to spray your birds also. A nice topical spray that a nice veterinarian could prescribe. Once you start getting those, you could spray the house. Very mild because you don't want to influence or you don't want to affect the birds negatively. All right, you could things that could be sprayed on them in a mist form to get rid of some of those mites that would have developed over time. But hygiene is key in terms of cleaning your house, turning the litter, cleaning the surroundings of the house, because these things from over time tend to invite unwanted pests and organisms, and that is what happens over time. But if you maintain clean surroundings and you spray ever so often, you could avoid those to a large extent. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much.
No problem. Questions? Don't be afraid.
We have Josephine. She's next. She has a question about the pellets. She wants to know what the pellets are made from.
All right. So the pellets are usually so the manufacturing companies, they don't dispel all of their feed stuff, but they use corn, soybean meal. Corn is for the energy. Soybean meal provides the protein. All right. You would find that that is the most expensive part of your feed, the soybean meal. And you know that we don't grow soybean meal here in the region. So a lot of our all the soybean meal is going to come from abroad. And that is why when we have challenges in the States and feed stuff prices change, you feel it here because the feed companies are not going to absorb all of that cost and they're going to make it back from you. So soybean meal, corn, you have what we call vitamins and minerals that they usually import also as feedstuff. We used to use local corn, but because you can't get a consistent supply of corn from the local producers, and also consistency in terms of the mineral and vitamins and the nutrient profiling, we import a lot of corn also. So basically, the majority of the feed is corn, soybean meal, and then you have vitamins and minerals mixed. But you would also find, all right, you would also find what we call additives into the feed. You're going to get some fat in the feed. You're going to have some things that are going to, what we use, what they call, what that is banned now. There's something that we used to use in the feed. The name slips me now. What it does, it would usually enhance the immune system of your birds. All right. As the name comes back to me, I'm gonna let you know further down. But you have additives, corn, soybean meal, and your vitamin premixes in the feed or in the pellets, as you would say. All right.
You're not talking about molasses, right? Is it molasses you're talking about?
Just no, not molasses, but I'll remember it as we go along.
All right.
Somebody was hearing.
Yeah, Josephine is there. Josephine is there.
No, I'm just saying thanks very much for that information.
No problem, no problem.
All right, we have a next question from Ms. Suarez. She's asking, what is the difference between organic eggs and free-range eggs?
Ooh. All right, organic is really a big thing that is hard to describe in times like these. If you have to have something organic, because your birds are free-ranging, the areas where your birds are free-ranging, you have no control of what they're going to consume. All right, so birds going to pick and forage at different things, even though they're out there in the bush. All right, you have to be able to state the water that the birds are drinking, whatever supplemental feed you are providing. Does it contain anything that could render it for being inorganic? The organic you have to have a level of certification. You have to meet certain criteria. And so if you can't, even though you know that you're not giving your birds anything that is inorganic, if you're not meeting or measuring up to the standards that somebody could come and inspect and say your stuff is organic, then it's hard to put your stuff out there and label it as organic if you're not abiding by certain principles, and if there isn't somebody to come and inspect and to really certify that you are organic. So to you, you may say, well, my birds are out there, they're foraging, I'm not using the feed that the feed companies are producing. It's just pure natural stuff. To you, you could say organic, but legally, it may not be, you cannot put things out there and label it as being organic unless you have applied to whatever organic growers association and they're able to inspect and say, well, you would have met the criteria, and then they give you the permission to label your stuff as organic. So that is where the toss-up could come. I hope I was able to answer your question.
You there, Ms. Suarez? You there?
Yes, thank you. I have another added question, if you don't mind.
No problem.
Being that I know the majority of soy that is out there in the world comes from China, or it's genetically modified. How can you be sure that you're not getting something that is that doesn't have any GMOs in it?
All right. You can't be totally sure, but the people who are doing the GMO products, once you have genetically modified products, you have to have that labeled as genetically modified. If they are not doing that, then they are in breach, and the company or the supplier of that could be penalized. All right. So you could be sure because people would do the right thing and label their stuff as genetically modified. All right. Other than that, you go with what is provided as non-GMO. Is the best that I could give at this time.
All right. Thank you.
Right. I'm seeing a question from Miss Julian. Can you clarify the myth about steroid use in chicken and the effects on humans? Ooh, pressure. Right. The good thing about, well, how do I answer this? The safest way for us as God's people, and as well, and for some of you who would have joined the chat, I don't know if everybody would be Christian, is if you're going to go the way of producing chickens or your animal protein, if you grow your stuff, you know what you have. There's no ideal from the big companies, but what we know, as far as my knowledge is concerned, they don't use steroids in birds. I remember Arawak had to dispel, and they were pretty angry. One of their workers was with me with a class that I took to them about this whole steroids in the birds, and they were on a tangent, so much so that they would have banned schools and groups coming to their plants, because of the bad publicity being put out there about steroids being put in the chicken. The thing about it is, if they're using steroids or anyway in your birds, if you're pumping your birds with anything like that, it's unethical, and it's gonna have a negative impacts on the people who consume them. But as far as I know, and the information brought to me from the companies that I know, the steroids are not used. If they pump it into what the birds are consuming, that is something that we would look at, that we need to look at. What they are doing in feeds now, a lot of people are using what we call probiotics in feeds, all right? For the mere reason that the thing that could hamper a bird from growing at the rate that it should grow is if that bird has to fight off diseases. And what the probiotic would do is enhance the immune system so that the birds, a lot of the energy being used to deal with internal parasites and diseases, etc., is used for growth and development. And so the probiotics are used into feeds, just as how we use probiotics. We put it in our system for gut health. That is the way that the poultry industry is going. Not that I'm trying to defend the poultry industry, but I don't have information that steroids are being used in their chickens, and so I can't really pronounce on that in any kind of marked way. Yes? So I hope that helps, Mr. Julian.
It did. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other question?
Yes. Before you invite the next question, I was just wondering about arsenic, because a speaker a few weeks ago, he mentioned to us that about the arsenic poisoning that is associated with the manure from chickens. Can you comment on that?
Right. Whew. Well, well, I have, if you're getting arsenic poisons from the poultry, because poultry litter is being used a lot into sweet potato, particularly sweet potato production, etc. Anything that could become toxic in that is because of what the birds are excreting, but also it could be because of the litter material that was used. So that in some wood that has been treated, where we use the dust or the shavings, if they mix with the litter and they decompose over time, maybe that could be a challenge. Or remember, if the birds are consuming particular things, remember they excrete. All right, so whatever is coming out in the feces, it could be as a result of what they would have consumed. So depending on what they're consuming could be added to that. But again, the poultry litter that they use for manure is not total feces. The feces is usually mixed with the sawdust, wood shavings, or whatever the material they use as bedding. And so that could be a contributing factor, because the feces is going to mix and they're going to decompose. All right. Also, what people do, depending, some people are going to treat the litter that they're going to use for their birds, to house their birds. Also, the people at the wood companies are going to treat the wood that they're going to use, and so the shavings, etc., is going to have that treatment. But in terms of, I have not read extensively on that, and so that is all that I could say for now. But maybe I could look into it further and maybe provide you with some feedback.
Okay, thank you. I guess before they use it in their gardens, then it's important that it's well composted before it is used.
Yes.
Yeah. Do we have any other further questions for Brother Edwards this morning? No, I'm not seeing any hands.
No.
But Edwards, can you tell us about quail? Quail is a growing interest here in Trinidad. Quail, rearing quail birds.
All right. Well, because I have not gone as much into quail. I wouldn't want to pronounce on it just yet. I'm seeing where even at the University Field Station, I believe that we have had some. Is that true, Doc?
Yes, we started a project there recently.
Right. So I have not done much work with them because I haven't interacted with them, at least in this space. So I don't want to pronounce on it just yet. Maybe in another session.
All right. Great.
Right. So is it that you want me to move on into the small ruminants, or?
Yes, you can go straight ahead. Go straight ahead.
All right. So let me do that, since as folks are afraid to ask further questions. All right, just a minute. All right, so we're seeing, I'm hoping that we could see the screen there. All right, so we want to quickly just take, the reason I want to initially just talk about sheep and goats is because sometimes we don't know, a lot of us, we don't know the difference in some cases. Sometimes even I go down the road with my wife and she would see a goat and say, look, a sheep. All right. So we'll go quickly and then I could tell you how we can get it into our backyard system, what we're going to use, and then we should be able to feed some questions and you all get back to your Sunday cooking and cleaning, etc. So after dogs, your sheep and goats would have been some of the earlier domesticated animals, all right? One thing to note is that the sheep and goats are what we refer to as ruminant animals, all right? So like you hear the psalmist David say, how the beasts of the field mourn and the cattle roar because there's no grass for them, so that these animals must, a basal or the majority part of their diet should be grass, all right? So that if you don't have grass and you don't intend to go cut grass, or you have no way to source grass, all right, I suggest that you leave the animals alone, all right? Unless you're gonna have them to help control your lawn or to help to get rid of unwanted weeds, or like in my times in growing up, where we come from, well, where I come from in Tobago, as a young boy, you had to have a sheep or a goat. It taught you a sense of responsibility, because you have to tie out that animal in the morning, make sure that there's water available, go get that animal in the afternoon and after school and bring it in safe in the shelters. And so you had that level of responsibility that you learn by having at least a goat or a sheep while growing up as a young man, all right? So, as I say, ruminant animals, basal part of the diet, the major part of the diet is supposed to be grass, all right? Because these are the animals that chew the cud, as we love that as people who are eating clean foods, all right? And so the grass is critical. And so if we can't have it or we can't source it, then I suggest that we not put the animals through that stress. They tend to not have an upper dental pad. So what we refer to as, where I grew up, they used to call them no teeth peggy, all right? So this area, you don't have teeth in the upper dental pad. However, we use this base in order to identify the age of the animal. There are times where we might need to find out the age, and a farmer can't tell you. He said, boy, that boy is 2015, and they don't know, but we are able to use the dentition to tell you the age of the animals, all right? They will carry their babies for about 5 months, unlike the cattle and the human beings who go for 9 months, all right? And so we usually refer to that period as their gestation period, all right? They could give birth to 1, 2, or 3, or in the case of what we call the Barbados black belly, I heard we had Barbados in the house, we could have 4, all right, in terms of offspring, all right? So, but usually you're gonna have 2, all right? In some cases, there are some breeds that are akin to 1 offspring, but 2 is generally the norm, all right? They are prey animals, and again, there's a season. For those of you who are into small ruminant animals, especially when you have animals outside and you don't have them intensively reared, there's a time of the year that dogs tend to wreak havoc among your small ruminant animals, particularly your sheep, because they are less defensive. A goat may try to ward off its attackers by butting and trying to put up a fight. You don't have that amongst the sheep population. And so dogs tend to make a mess of your animals if you're not careful, particularly during certain times of the year. Right, so this is what your sheep would look like. This is what a goat looks like, okay? In certain parts, especially away, you have sheep that would grow wool, but in these parts, we have what you call hair sheep, all right? We don't have wool sheep, but you would find that we have some crossbred animals, especially there's a new breed on the, well, not new, but relatively new, the Katahdin. You're gonna get some wool, not on the entire animal, but on parts of the animal. But in most parts, we have what we call hair sheep, all right? The sheep, they came from what we call the mouflon. This has been the ancestor. So over time, you would have all the breeds of sheep coming from what we would have referred to as these mouflon type animals. Your goats, the body is covered with hair, all right? In some cases, people use the cashmere and the mohair goat for the fiber that they produce. We don't have those breeds here, all right? But you would find that almost all of your goats have horn, except for those that we remove the horn from, especially in the early stages, because of safety issues. Remember, goats with horn, especially if you have goats that are going to be handled or you have people being trained, etc., the horns could be a detrimental or could be a dangerous factor, and so they are removed. But there are some goats that are polled, meaning that they are born genetically, they don't have horns, and we call them polled. That is how you could see some cattle without horns, all right? Most of your sheep tend to be polled, all right? If you have sheep with horns, you would have the male animals or the rams, all right? So a male sheep would be a ram and a male goat would be a buck, all right? So you would find that the male sheep, if you're gonna have horns among sheep, you would usually have it with the males, all right? And they tend to grow backward in as opposed to the goats that grow outward and straight, all right? Right, so you would find that many goats tend to have this, what we call the beard, all right? Either sex, the females can have it also, all right? But the sheep, they don't have beard, but they have what we call the mane, all right? So this is nice here along the chest there. You would find it mostly in the, what we call the rams, right? Right, the sheep, in terms of their feeding, the sheep are referred to as grazers. So this is why they go close to the ground. And this is why, if not managed properly, because some of us say we like them to control the lawn and things like that, but if you're not providing or if you're not watching how long you keep them on your lawn could change into a dust bowl where there's no lawn at all, just dust, all right? And so you have to be careful. Your goats like to browse. They like to stand on their hind legs and eat. They like to eat from high up, right? They're more stush, right? When your sheep is going to graze on the grounds. They don't like getting wet though. The sheep would get wet, they don't mind, but you see the feet, and this is, which brings us into part of the husbandry. Small ruminant animals suffer a lot from what we call hoof rotting, right? And the hoof rotting or the wet, damp, soggy conditions are what is going to expose them to hoof rotting. The organism that goes in between these nice little spaces and get into the soft flesh likes a damp, moist, muddy conditions. And so if you're going to have your sheep and goat, you want to make sure that these stay as dry as possible, all right? This is why some people have gone to slatted floors, having them off the ground so that they are not into the feces, into wet, soggy conditions. Or if you're going to have them on the floor in the deep litter, you have to ensure that your litter remains dry, all right? And your litter is nice and comfy, not soggy and wet. Right, your sheep tend to be more muscular, they grow fatter, they grow faster, all right, than your goats. They tend to be leaner, more angular, and they grow slower than your sheep, all right? If somebody tells you, boy, you smell like a buck or a male goat, it's not really a compliment. They tend to give off a smell, especially during the breeding season. So that if you have a buck, sometimes you could get that smell from way down the road, all right? And the thing about it is, it's rarely that pheromone, because of the mating season, it rarely sends off that. So the females, they get into heat, the females get more receptive to mating, right? So that is just nature doing its stuff, all right? And it's not that the goat is sick or something like that, all right? Rams, they do not have that strong odor, but you have to be careful about them, especially during that breeding season also. If you're gonna house these animals, you're gonna make sure that once you're dealing with them, you don't turn your back to them. As much as you find them tame and accord and they are being around people a lot, all right, you don't turn your back to them, because unlike goats, goats have to charge up. You would see if a goat is really getting ready to hit you, all right? A sheep, on the other hand, don't have to make up itself, all right? You know the thing that they say when you come to shoot and don't talk? Yeah, your rams are gonna do that. You're just gonna feel yourself being lifted off the ground, all right? Because they don't have to charge. They're gonna ram you, for want of a better word, all right? So you don't turn your back to them, all right? They like, especially when you do that, because it gives them that inclination to attack. But I'm not saying that they're all fierce and you shouldn't have them. There are just certain things that you don't want to do around them, all right? Your sheep, they are very gregarious, meaning they like to flock together. They like to be in groups, and they always have a leader. So you would notice that if you move a herd, if you get the leader to go in a particular direction, everybody follows, all right? They are very timid, so that they are not animals that you want to spook or jump or jumbie, as the young people say, because they are not the wisest of the domesticated species, in that they would see a wall and they would try to escape from you through that fence, let's say fence, and they would realize they can't go on. As you get closer, they're gonna try, and sometimes they would hurt themselves, all right? So you need to be careful that when you treat with them, when you're dealing with them, you can't be jumpy, you can't wild them, you just have to be careful, all right, and don't make any sudden movements, etc., all right? The goats are more independent and adventurous and curious. So you find them doing a lot of weird things, jumping on cars and getting over fence and things like that, all right? So they're a lot harder to contain, all right? Just a small trivia. So of course, this is a sheep, not a goat. Again, this would have horns, but as I said, if you have the males, the horns would grow like that in the sheep. So this is a sheep. This is a goat, however, all right? Sheep, sheep, all right, goat, all right, sheep, all right, sheep, goat, all right? So one of the easiest ways to differentiate between your sheep and goat, you look at the tail, all right? The sheep tend to have a tail that goes downward, all right? And the goat, sorry, usually has an erected tail, all right? Why do we raise them? Well, for multi-purposes. Some people for meat, all right? Young sheep, when you have a young sheep that is less than a year, we call that meat lamb, all right? And if the meat is old, if it's from an older sheep, we call it mutton. And the meat from goat, we call chevron, or in the terms of Spanish, we call it the cabrito, all right? So we give them for meat, but also we raise them for milk. And some of you may say milk from sheep, but you would find that there are certain parts of the world that sheep milk is a delicacy, it's a big thing, all right? Sheep and goat milk, they have many helpful qualities. You would find that now a lot of people are moving away from the cow's milk, from cattle milk, and they're going to goat milk. Well, we have not warmed up to sheep milk here. For the mere fact that even if you go to sheep milk, in terms of the volume and the quantities that you're going to get from a sheep, it pales in comparison to goats, all right? But you would find that people who are lactose intolerant can drink goat and sheep milk, right? If you look at for people who have to get their milk, and although we tend to want to have milk, you would notice that when the kids or the sheep or even a calf have reached a certain age, you don't see them drinking from their mothers or sucking the tuts any longer. It's only us as human beings, after we're weaned, we still want to have milk. We want to have milk and everything. We want to have our daily supply of milk, all right? So it makes you wonder, but if you have to go to milk, if you want an option for milk, when a calf is born, a calf is a very heavy, all right? If a calf is born and students have to weigh a calf, one student can't properly lift a calf or move a calf to be weighed. All right, so you're talking about, say, 40 pounds plus, all right? So you think about that, 40 pounds plus, it means that the milk created from the mother of a cow is really to meet that weight, to deal with the weight of that calf, the composition of that milk. When you look at a goat or a sheep, when they are born, 6 pounds, 7 pounds, and then 5 pounds. And when you think about the baby, a birth of a child, 6 to 8 pounds, 8 pounds, around that. So you're thinking, wait, the composition of the milk of a goat might be more akin or similar to that of the human being. All right. Not putting a plug for goat's milk, but I'm saying it may be a better option when we talk about comparing the cattle, much heavier, more condensed, a more potent milk composition as compared to that from a goat or sheep. All right. So we get wool in some certain parts. They use the wool from the sheep and the goats. All right. We use the goats to control unwanted weeds and even the sheep to control the lawn. All right. We find them, we use them in research, etc. All right. And I hope that this part of the presentation was a bit helpful as we get into the more juicy stuff. Any questions? Right. So when we say ram goat, yeah, yes. So that, yeah, it's wrong. It's incorrect to say a ram goat because a ram is a male sheep and it's akin to a description for sheep. All right, and it's a different species to a goat. A goat is a buck. So the female for the goat is a doe, and the male is a buck. Similarly in rabbits go with doe and bucks also. So don't run about saying ram goat. But we grew up hearing that, but it's not correct. It's not the correct thing to say. All right. And then again, yes. So mutton is for the aged sheep, and if they're under a year, we say lamb. All right, and we find that goat is the chevron or the cabrito. All right, nice. Right, any questions before we go on? Any questions?
If you find, okay, you say a sheep is a ram sheep, and what you will call it the female sheep?
The female sheep is a ewe. E-W-E.
Oh, interesting.
All right.
Very interesting.
Right. So mutton is fatty because, all right, when we talk about meat, the meat that we get here in terms of that we refer to as lamb and mutton, etc., they are not from, we import a lot of our small ruminant meat. The meat from the mutton from the sheep and thing that we get here is more lean. Because if you look at the structure of the sheep that we have here, it's lean and sometimes chewy, and it's not as fat as the mutton that you're going to get from the mutton that we import. So we import billions of dollars into small ruminant meat. You would find that those meat grown abroad, they tend to have a lot more fat because people cherish the fat. Fat gives you the enhanced juiciness in the meat. So the marbling in your meat that people love, that lamb, they crave that fat because the fat enhances the taste, all right, and also adds to the flavor, etc. But also to a large extent, the diets that they would consume, out there, all right, has a lot of energy, and the breeds of the animal also lend themselves to a more fat in the meat because that's where the demand is. All right, so that is why when you go to the fancy restaurants, when you go to do fine dining, etc., the rack of lamb that you order, lamb chops, etc., you can't get that from all local sheep, all right, because all local sheep is too lean, and you can't rack the lambs as you would do for those imported lambs that we get. So like the Merino and all those big time sheep that you have abroad, those are the kind of lambs that we're going to get here. So the meat, you'd find a lot of fat in that type meat. All right, and so the cold temperatures, Suarez saying the cold temperatures, of course, because of you want insulation, and so your animals need that level of insulation, especially when it gets cold, and so the fat in the meat, or the fat, all right, in the body helps with that insulation, all right? Thank you for that, Ms. Suarez.
Gladys has a question, and I saw her put on her mic. Gladys, you had a question? All right, I'm not seeing or seeing any other questions. So,
Yes,
Brother Edward,
yes, good morning.
get a lot of feedback. Go
Get
ahead.
the feedback. Okay, yes. Let me see. Good morning, everyone, and
Good
good
morning,
morning,
Joseph.
sir. Thanks for your informative discussion.
Yes,
I would like to ask one question.
sure.
In St. Martin, it's very hard to get the cow manure,
Mhm.
and we usually do up there the composting, but we also use the animal manure to make a kind of liquor in that we soak it for a while and then throw off the water on the plants.
Mhm.
I we had to use we have been using goat. Is that a fair use of that?
Of the
Is I hear
manure?
safe,
Yeah.
whatever
Yes.
comments?
Yeah. What you find, what is interesting about the manure, um, it may not be, as some say, it may not be as potent, maybe as the pig or the cattle manure, but it has been taking grounds in terms of the manure use. All right. Because of the volume that you're going to get from a cow, that may be one of the major difference in terms of volume, because with the cows you get a nice big pie prop that drops on the ground. It could fill a plate. With the goat and sheep, you have like channel, little dots, all right, that is scattered about the place. So in terms of maybe the nutrient profiling, you may have some difference. In terms of volume, you're going to have difference, volume per bag and volume over time. But you're going to have the same effect. The difference would be is if you test that final composition, or you do a lab test between the two, it tells you whether there's a significant difference in terms of nutrient profiling and the effect that it's going to have on the liquor. But you could use the manure. Nothing is wrong with using the manure. They are both ruminant animals. Changing grass into milk and meat, all right, the grass that we can't eat. Your ruminant animals are so versatile, they're able to convert the grass that they eat into milk and to meat and the different things, and even into manure. All right, so they consume the same things, and as I said, the only thing that is going to be different is that one may have a greater proportion of nitrogen in terms of energy, or whatever is used for your liquor. There would be a difference in volume, but they are both ruminant animals, providing you the similar benefits in terms of the manuring, etc.
Thank you very much.
Yes. So I know time is of the essence. Let me do this final, where is this final. So when we have our sheep and goat friends, right? When we have our sheep and goats, the key thing is to be able to manage them. And we have to understand that the species may differ a little, and there are certain things that we have to look for, all right, in terms of, so there's not a one size fit all when we're treating with these animals, especially at something that we refer to as their physiological state, all right? When we have animals, if we have them intensively, so that the systems of production, let me say, could be extensive, where your animals are outside, they're grazing. But I mean, in this case, and in this day and age, you can't have your animals roaming into people's place. All right, as God's people, responsible people, you can, especially where people are planting more. Even though you have your animals ranging, you must provide boundaries in which the animals don't go into people's property to cause war. All right? Because as witnesses for Christ, you don't want to be at war with your neighbors and with people in the community, etc. All right? So yes, we're going to free range. Yes, we're going to have extensive systems, but with control to make sure that they don't break into other people's property and cause problems. And then you have intensively reared, all right? Where you have intensive, you have to make sure that your animals, you meet the requirements, their nutrient requirements, because how they grow and develop would all depend on you because they're not foraging for their own feed. They're not going anywhere. They eat, drink, and sleep and defecate, and you are responsible to a large extent to how they grow and develop. And then you have the semi-intensive. Some people allow them to go out in the day, forage, do what they have to do. They get to come in the evening. They lock them away because you have predator larceny. People thief your animals. All right. You have predators like dogs that are going to attack your animals. And a lot of things happen in the night. So you want to make sure that your animals are inside. And in the semi-intensive system, you also provide some supplemental source of energy, all right, or feed for the animals. So species, whether goat or sheep, you would find that there are some slight changes in the nutrient requirement, their genetic makeup. In some animals, some grow faster, some are heavier producers of milk than the others, greater volumes. Some produce more offspring than others. So genetically, you have to look at that. The weight, all right, so you have bigger framed animals as opposed to smaller frame. Age, younger animals tend to always have a higher requirement when compared to your older animals, because the older animals have already grown. Your younger animals are producing yet still growing. All right, so male or female again is going to have a different requirement, a different demand, stage of production, all right, in terms of whether they are pregnant, whether they are lactating, whether they are just fattening. The body condition and the environment are going to influence a lot on the nutrition you provide, right? And so apart from, people tend to like to boast about the feed stuff, and they have this feed, and they have leukemia, and they have some fancy moringa and thing that they could feed the animals. But really, animals are really concerned, or when we talk about nutrition, we are really concerned with these basics. You see this? Water, energy, protein, fat, vitamins, and minerals. Once your feedstuff could provide these in the amount required by the animals, that's the most important thing. So not all the fanciness or the fancy feedstuff is whether they can provide the nutrients required. And you look here and you say, water? But what chopping is this man talking? But yes, in terms of animal nutrition, water is a nutrient, and it's the most neglected nutrient. All right, and so people tend to neglect it, and they don't know how important it is. Most of the metabolic processes, all the metabolic processes going on in the animal, in the body of the animal, requires water. All right, you would find also that the animal needs to have a fresh or a clean supply of water daily. And this has been the downfall of a lot of producers, in that if I go home by Miss Wilson, or if I go home by Pastor Clark, and I get a peep in the kitchen and see the condition of that kitchen, I could be thirsty like a dog. All right, I don't want to drink any water from there. All right, if that condition is in a state that flies are all over the place and dirty, mossy things going on in that kitchen, right? I rather wait till I reach down the road and buy a bottle of water. All right. So likewise, if you wouldn't drink stale water, you wouldn't drink water from a cup that nasty. All right. This is the same way you need to provide clean water for your animals. All right. Because water is an essential nutrient, and it's critical to their growth and development. Okay. All right. So what we are concerned with when we're talking about nutrients, we are moving from a place where people like to talk about the percentage nutrient, but nutrients supposed to be provided in pounds or in kilograms. All right. So you talk about kilograms of energy or protein that the animal or a particular animal needs. All right. In terms of your macro minerals, grams, parts per million for your micro minerals. So we're not going to get into the depth with that, because that is for like students who are doing their degrees, etc. All right. But for your small ruminant animal, what is important is that they consume about 2 to 4% of their body weight dry matter. Why I say dry matter? Because a feed is comprised of water, all right, or moisture and dry matter, all right? If you determine a feed composition, its chemical composition, or its nutrient profiling on their percent moisture, all right, moisture is very variable. It changes. So that a field or grass in the field may have 90% water in the morning. By mid-morning, it may have 78% moisture. By midday, 65%. So you're seeing how variable the percent moisture could be. The dry matter, on the other hand, doesn't change. And so anytime you're talking about the feeding on a dry matter basis, it's a more accurate determination of the nutrient provided. And in the dry matter of your feed is where you find most of your nutrients. In the dry matter, you're going to find crude protein, you're going to find fat, you're going to find fiber, you're going to find soluble carbohydrates in the dry matter of the feed. So when you have small ruminant, based on the weight, they're supposed to consume between 2 to 4% dry matter of feed. All right, 2 to 4% of their body weight. All right, you would find that because there's a range, it means that the 2% is if you want that animal to really not lose weight, but you don't want them to gain weight. So you're just maintaining the animal and keeping the animal in a particular state. Right? When we talk about maintenance, that is what we're talking about. If you go up to 2.5 and 3% and thing, it means that that animal is going into production, or that animal is under condition and you're trying to bring the animal back to an acceptable condition. And so that is how you're going to change the range in which you feed your animals according to their percent dry matter. All right? So when we're feeding, this is what we're going to discuss in the coming minutes. All right? I know you're eager. We're going to get through this quickly. We're looking at the nutritional management of your goat and sheep, but your ewes, which is your female sheep, and those, there are a few periods in which we must manage. The dry period that we're going to discuss, breeding, gestation or pregnancy, lactation or milk production, or whether they are nursing, and weaning. Weaning meaning that you're separating the offspring from the parents, all right? They're not going to stay with them all their lives. And then when we look at the lambs or kids, right? The lamb is a young sheep, all right? All right, and the kid is a young goat, all right? So lambs for sheep and kids for goats, all right? So when we talk about lambs and kids, we're looking at newborn, pre-weaning, that means just before you wean them, post-weaning, meaning after you would have separated them from their parents, and whether you're getting it ready to go and slaughter, or you're gonna use it back in the herd for breeding. And then we have the bucks and rams, whether you're keeping them for maintenance and breeding. So we're gonna look quickly into that, and then we would be able to feed your questions right after, okay? So this is how the cycle goes. You have your female doe, or you have your ewe, all right? So you're gonna have the dry period, whether you're just maintaining that animal, then you have that period for breeding, because let me hasten to say, you want to have backyard production, or you're going to use animals in a small space, whether you have them for manure or whether you have them for meat. Because when I grew up, we used to have animals, and the animals would be for when there's a celebration, when somebody's going to get married, you don't have to go and buy meat, you slaughter your animals. If you have goat and you have cows, we used to milk the cows for home use, milk goat for home use. All right, I grew up on a lot of goat milk. All right, and so you use the manure in the garden, etc. Right, but you can't have milk if you don't have offspring. I would say that again. So some people just think that you have a big goat and automatically you could just go and hold the other. The other is what is akin to the breast in the human beings, right? And you grab the teat, which is the nipple, and try to squeeze milk. It doesn't work that way. In order for you to get milk, you must have offsprings. So the animals have to reproduce, all right? So it's not just, unless you just have a bunch of bucks or males, all right, you can't milk those. But once you have females, in order for you to get milk, they must get pregnant, they must conceive and produce an offspring, because The milk is in response to the birth of the offsprings. All right? Yes, you sit down and you say, ooh, yes, the milk that you like to drink, the milk that you're going on the shelves, though the milk was really produced for the growth of the offspring, you know, but we as self-interested beings, we're taking it away from the offspring, all right? And so what you find that people into big production, people who have large dairy units, they don't allow the offspring to suckle. All right, what you do in the early stages, you're gonna milk the animal and take what we call colostrum. We're gonna get into that in a little bit. And the colostrum, what we do is hand feed or pail feed or bottle feed the offspring. Because if you allow that offspring to suckle and that mother forms that bond with that offspring, well, pressure for you. You ain't getting no milk there, and it's bacchanal and kicking and fighting, because she knows that the milk is for her offspring, all right? And if you allow the bond to take place and you're holding her down to milk her, then you understand the challenges that you could encounter, because she's just trying to look after the interests of her offspring, all right? Right, so we breed. Then the animal gets pregnant, and then the animal lactates after giving birth. Lactating means that she's producing milk for the offspring, and then we wean off that offspring. And so the cycle continues. That is how it works, all right? So don't think you're going into backyard thing and you're just having a ewe and she's getting into heat, you're not breeding her, and for her entire life, you just have her eating grass and not doing anything for you. You're spending all that money in feed, all right, and not seeing the returns, all right? So for the dry period, what you have is your female animal is recovering from giving milk and she's preparing to get rebred, right? So what you're trying to do is rebuild the body condition and reserves. Because remember, to carry that offspring for 5 months, it would have been a demand on her, all right? In terms of the nutrients, all right? Because the developing fetus, etc., would have been taken from her, right? Much less after the birth, the milk production takes a lot of energy. And so if she's not getting it in the feed or in the diet, it's going to be coming from her body. So it takes a toll on her body. And so at this stage, you're trying to rebuild the condition and get her back in a shape in order to get pregnant again, all right? The length of that dry period would depend on how often or how soon after you're going to rebreed her after she gives birth. Normally, for proper production systems, they have a lambing interval or birthing interval about 8 months. So if she gives birth today, about 8 months down the road, she should be able to give birth again, all right? Or she should be pregnant and getting ready to give birth, all right? So during the stage, the dry period, all you need is forage, just forage to keep her into that condition, all right? She's not lactating, she's not putting on weight. So any good forage that you have should be able to keep her during this period, all right? Then if we're going to breed her, all right, it means therefore there's something that we call flushing, all right? So the animal may not be in the condition that she should be, all right? And so we're not gonna go into body condition scoring, etc., but she needs to get in a condition where she increases the amount of eggs that she releases, right? Which in turn increases the chances of you getting twins or even triplets, all right? Or in the terms of your Barbados black belly, quadruplets, all right? So flushing gonna do that. How you're gonna do it is that you're really increasing the plane of nutrition about 2 weeks before she goes into breeding, all right? And you're gonna continue that 3 to 4 weeks into the breeding season, but what you're doing is about half pound of grain, or you're gonna give her half pound of grain per day, all right? Grain would be that concentrate feed, whether cracked corn, whether ruminant mix, whether small ruminant ration, all right? What we need to pay attention to is if she's in good condition already, her body's solid, she's not emaciated, she's in ideal condition, doing this, increasing the plane of nutrition, is just going to get her fat, right? And you don't want a fat animal, especially when she goes into giving birth, etc. If she's fat, you're going to have reproductive issues. and a whole heap of things that you don't want to deal with. So that if the animal is in good condition, you don't flush her. You don't increase the plane of nutrition, all right? So in early gestation, now she's pregnant. What is happening? All right, the embryo is implanted into the uterus. The mammary gland starts to develop. The placenta is developing. All right, a lot of things are going on so that the energy demands are coming up. All right, and so the quantity is really more than the quantity in this stage. All right, and then in the late gestation, this is where the problem comes in. Rapid fetal growth. All right, limited rumen capacity. And so let me speak to that quickly. We in the region have a lot of problems with our Barbados black-bellied sheep, all right? The problem is they have multiple offsprings. So apart from any other breed, this is what we call, you would hear a term prolific, meaning that they give plenty offsprings. And so because genetically, these animals could give you 3 up to 4 offspring, it means that the capacity of the rumen is enlarged. If the rumen is enlarged, it means that there is hardly space. The abdomen is enlarged, sorry, my bad. So if the abdomen is increasing in size, it's constricting the rumen, right? And the rumen is that vat where the animal stores feed. So it means, therefore, at this stage, she can't eat as much as she would usually eat, all right? And because she can't eat as much as she would usually eat, the quality of your nutrition has to be right up, all right? What happens normally, and a problem that a lot of our farmers face, is that because she can't get that energy, because the quality of nutrition is not right at this stage, we get a problem that we refer to as pregnancy toxemia, or they say preg-tox for short, all right? Or lambing disease. So the animal goes down, all right? And she doesn't get up. She goes down and she can't get up because she's weak. She's not getting enough energy. She has a lot of offspring, but her energy demands are not being met, all right? And we refer to it as ketosis also, because if you go close to the animal, you get a kind of high ammonia scent, all right? What happens in that case, if she's not treated with as soon as, she dies. She dies and all the offspring dies. So all the 4 lambs that were in the tummy, you're gonna lose that also. And so what happens, they have something called glycol that they could put as a fast form of energy to try to get her to stand up, all right? And they try to provide some liquid form of energy. But the thing about it is, you don't want her to get to that stage because sometimes they have to give her a kind of steroid at that stage or something called dextrose to pass out the offspring so that they could try to stand a chance of saving them, or the veterinarian is going to do a C-section to try to take out the lambs. But you don't want her to get to that stage. So you want to make sure that the quality of the nutrition, because she cannot eat much, your feed must be more nutrient dense to take care of her energy needs, all right? And so plenty of us, I'm stressing on it because if you're going to do backyard, it means that some of you may get that same Barbados black belly. And if she's pregnant and we don't pay particular attention to that, we could end up with a lot of deaths on our hands, all right? So if your nutrition isn't good, by overfeeding, because you could have overfeeding as being bad nutrition, dystocia, this is what we refer to as a difficult pregnancy, and you see what's going on here. So remember I said that you don't want to get the animal too fat. If the animal gets fat, the walls of the reproductive tract starts to come in. And so it means that the offspring that's supposed to pass through that tract could get stick, all right, or could get breached, all right? And sometimes you could have prolapsing where the entire vaginal area comes out and, you know, the veterinarian had to come and put it back in and stitch it up, yeah? So you don't want to overfeed. You don't want to get the animal too fat. But if you don't feed properly, all right, the lower or the decrease in energy would lead to ketosis or that pregnancy toxemia that I spoke about. Milk fever, which is a decrease in calcium or calcium deficiency. These two work hand in hand. And what is happening is sometimes we are unable to tell the difference between the two until you start giving treatment. So if you start putting glucose, that glucogenic form of energy, the animal is going to respond. If the animal doesn't respond, you treat for calcium and the animal responds. All right, so you get to tell the difference between the two because they work so closely. Sometimes you can't tell right off the bat. You're going to have weaker lambs than kids. When you have weaker lambs than kids being born, their chance of surviving tends to be very, very nil or very limited. You could have a lot of mortality. All right, the colostrum that we spoke about, that first milk that your offspring is supposed to have, all right, it's going to be less and it's going to be not as potent as it should be. In terms of the amount of milk being produced by the parent, is going to reduce, and as a result, your lambs and kids are going to perform poorly. All right, so this is why the nutrition is so important. So we're saying yes to grass. Grass as the basal diet should be the majority of the diet. The quality of the grass, especially during that late trimester or late pregnancy, is important. And if you're feeding directly grass, you must have a form or source of energy, whether you boil cassava, your ground cassava, or you have your ground provision and you make available, because the energy, the grass doesn't have the amount of energy to carry that type of pregnancy, all right? Or the quality of the grass, that is. Because if you look in the region, especially under our climate, we tend to have a problem with the quality of our grass, particularly during the dry periods of the year, all right? So lactation is the time where you want the highest nutrient requirements because the animal is putting out a lot of energy. And when she's lactating, apart from the energy she's putting out, she must put out a lot of protein in that milk for the growth and development of the offspring, and calcium for growth, for bone development, etc. So you would find that any animal that is lactating, producing milk, is going to be in high demand for quality feeds, all right? So if you have the backyard goat and thing, and you're milking the animal, if you want the animal to have an extended lactation period, lactation just means the days over which she's going to produce milk, you have to make sure you meet that with quality water, fresh water, because about 65% of that milk is made up of water. So if the animal doesn't have access to pure water and a readily supply of water, it's going to reduce the production of milk because she can't give you powder. She's not going to give you milk powder. All right, so your water must be there, but also if you want her to continue to produce over a longer period, because even if I said that you must have offsprings in order to have milk, she doesn't produce milk indefinitely. So it's not because you have offspring, you're going to have milk for the rest of your days. All right, there's going to come a time where she dries off. All right, and so for cattle, a cattle will dry off over 300 plus days. Goats, between 250 days, 295 days, they're going to start to dry off, meaning they're going to give you less milk until they stop, because now they're ready to get back into reproduction. They need to be rebred and to give birth again, etc. All right, but the length of that cycle, and many people capitalize on that cycle, would be dependent on how you manage her during that. And nutrition is one of those key aspects, all right? So for the general rule of thumb, you feed 1 pound of grain for each lamb that a ewe is nursing, 1 pound of grain per day for the ewes nursing lambs on pasture. If you're dealing with meat goats, like the Boer goats, 1 pound of a 16% crude protein ration per day. And if you're feeding a milking goat, feed 1 pound of grain for each 3 pounds of milk she produces. All right? Right. So let me just deal with the colostrum and then we'll end there, the newborn. Your animals, when you have them at home, once you have an animal pregnant, all right, if you don't have a buck around, or if you don't have a ram around, many a times, well, where I grew up, anybody who is into livestock or who have small animals around their farm, they're going to have a ram or they're going to have a buck. So how we do it, how we did it in my times of growing up, you identify, a good partner or somebody who have a ram or has a buck. And when she calls, that is the term that they would usually use, but it just means when she gets into heat, right? There are certain signs that she exhibits. She bears a lot. You see mucus discharge coming from the vulva at the back, all right? They tend to be restless, and so you know that she's into heat. And so you take her down to the neighbor or the friend that has a buck or a ram to perform the service. Now that you know in about 5 months' time, she's going to give birth. All right. And there are also signs that she gives you when she's nearing that time. All right. So the mammary gland develops very huge. All right. She starts to have sinks at the sides of her tummy. It starts to come in. All right. You want to make sure that you provide a nice dry area for her. Right. Get an area, put some dry grass, surround the area, because what would happen if you have a lambing or kidding on the outside in the bushes, chances are if rain comes, if things happen out there, you're unaware, and so you could have deaths occurring. So you want to monitor when she gives birth. You want her in a nice area in case you have to assist with her giving birth. You want the kids or the lambs to be born in a nice dry environment. There are times where you may have to clip the neighbor's string and dip it in some iodine to prevent screwworms and flies getting into that area, all right, which could cause you further problems. So you must create a nice dry environment, all right? Within the first 12 to 24 hours, that lamb or kid must get the colostrum, all right? So the colostrum is potent, filled with energy, antibodies, laxative, vitamin A, all right? So it provides that level of immunity for the first couple of days of the life of that lamb or kid. You would find by instinct within a couple of minutes after giving birth or after being born, the kids or the lambs try to stand up. If they don't, you would find her trying to raise them up. She uses her foot, she grunts, she tries to get them up because she's trying to position herself to ensure that they get that colostrum, all right? And so you're able, because you're watching, you're able to monitor, you're checking to see how long before the kid or the lamb gets up, all right? And so you want to make sure that they are feeding on that colostrum in the first couple of days, all right? Then you may want to remove you would find that she's cleaning them, she's licking to remove all the mucus from their face, etc., all right? And also by doing that, she's creating a bonding also. What you would want to do in the event that is a poor mother, there are some mothers that, sometimes first-time mothers, they run away from the lamb because, it's the first time this thing is happening and they're kind of delirious and thing. And so in that sense, you may have to restrain that mother and remove that colostrum to make sure that it's available to the young, all right? And so you have to make sure that the colostrum is given or that they receive that colostrum within the first couple hours, right? That is critical to their survival. What you could do also for people who are into production, people milk that colostrum out and they could freeze the extra colostrum. So in the event in the future, you have an emergency, say for instance, you or your doe comes down with what we call mastitis, all right? It's an inflammatory disease of the udder, all right? And she's unable to give that milk after birth. You could thaw that colostrum and feed it to another lamb or another kid, all right? So all of those are some of the things, some of the tricks that you would need to have when you're having these animals and you're rearing them on a small scale, all right? Right, so now that I've stressed you enough, let me speak quickly to the rams and then we close off. Your rams and your bucks are animals that you don't want to run fat either. You want to keep them into maintenance mode. So there are times where you have your rams, you have your goats, but they are not breeding. So it's not like you're gonna have them running for the entire year with the ewes or the does, all right? There are times of the year where you want to plan your breeding, all right? And so if you're going to do that, You want to maintain them. You don't want them to get fat, but you don't want them to lose weight. You must always also, even though you have these animals, bucks or your rams being reared intensively, you want to make sure that you have an exercising area for them, right? So that they could go out and exercise and run a bit and stay fit, all right? Because when the mating season comes, they have to mount, they have to jump, they have to, you know, so you have to keep them active. When they are going to breed, you want to make sure that you start upping their nutrition, because a ram or a buck could service about 30 females at any given time. So that's the ratio, all right? So you turn him out to 25 to 30 females, all right? When you do that, it's girls galore, and he's not concerned too much with eating, all right? It's similarly, those of you who have what we call male dogs in the yard, there are times if your yard isn't fenced, your dog goes away when a female dog is in heat. He goes away for days. Sometimes you see him come back and you wonder if he has been eaten, all right? Because during that mating time, they are not so much concerned about eating. And so the rams, they're gonna be jumping, they're smelling females, they're running, and by instinct, all they want to do is mate. And because they're gonna throw off some condition, you could start to build their condition, move them from that state of maintenance so that they could increase, they could put on some weight, because they're gonna use that, they're gonna lose that weight during the breeding time, all right? After you have removed them after the breeding season, you would find that you want to also help them to recover after that breeding season, all right? So for your females, quickly, for your goats, their estrous cycle, it would be 21 days, and the sheep 17 days, all right? So that if they would have been in heat today and you weren't able to get them serviced in time, you know that 17 days to the sheep, 21 days to the goat, later down, they're gonna come back into heat. And so you could plan for that, all right? The thing about it is the longer, if you're into production, the longer you have your animals open, it's not a good thing for you, because it means that you're spending your money in feed, you're putting out a lot of work there, and your animal isn't reproducing, all right? So that is something for you to take note of. All righty then, so I've said a lot. We spoke about our sheep and goats, rearing our small ruminants in the small space. I would have tried, given you a handful, try to just touch the surface a bit. All right, so we go into some questions now. Right.
I think you gave us more than a handful. You gave us more than a handful.
Yes.
See any questions? Do we have any questions about Andell?
I do have two.
Sure.
All right, so the first one is you mentioned, well, you showed a slide that said the amount of pounds that would be needed for a sheep or goat to eat. If you're not able to weigh it, is there a way that you can eyeball it?
Right, so what you would do, what we usually do in that initial stage, all right, you try to get a weight and get a container in that, all right, we weigh a pound of feed and there's a particular container. If we fill it, we know that that's a pound. So what you do, you just keep it handy, you keep it on hand, so that every time you know you're going to feed, you fill that container and it gives you an idea of that you have a pound of feed to feed, understand?
Yeah, that makes sense.
But what is going to happen as you continue to feed that container, you're able to eyeball it eventually.
Okay, all right, so with experience, the eyes improve.
Yes, yes.
All right, my second question is, what are your thoughts of how do you tell the characteristics of mutated or genetically modified sheep or goat?
Usually, well, in these parts, I can't say that we are able to, because what you have is what we have. We have the indigenous breeds. If you bring in animals, or if we import animals, or what we do, what they have now is you could have what we call embryo transfer. so that those animals, where you could bring in embryos and implant them into one of the animals here, and the animals carry the pregnancy and give birth, those you may want to watch at because you have to be careful of the source. But locally, under all conditions, because we don't have labs and because we don't have that kind of work going on here, I can't say that we are able to eyeball it because most of the birds that we have is from AI, where we have artificial insemination of the animals, or the animals go through natural breeding. All right, so I haven't been able to come across anything that was genetically modified unless an embryo was brought in, a genetically modified embryo, and implanted into one of our animals here. Yeah.
Okay. And the question came to mind when you mentioned that we have lean meat, goat meat, I think, but if we get it from abroad, it's a lot fattier.
Yeah, that is the meat I'm talking about is for a slaughtered animal, eh?
Okay.
After you would have killed the animal and have it cut up and stuff, so that you would see you would see the difference because of the composition, how the marbling in the meat is, the volume of the meat, etc. You're able to tell. But in terms of whether that slaughtered meat was genetically modified, I don't have the eyes for it. A person who is specialized into meats, etc., may be able to say that. All right.
Got you. Thank you.
I've seen sheep and goat manure. You can't really tell because unless you have the animals being separated in a particular area, you'd be able to tell because they give you the same balls or the channels. All right. You could tell the difference between the cow because the cow gives you a big pie. It drops on the ground, crash, as akin to small balls. All right. In terms of being better for plants, once they are cured, all manure would be used for plant. But in terms of which could give you better growth or provide you with a better nutrient profiling, the verdict is out on cow's manure because of the research that would have been done on it. I haven't seen anything on goat and sheep manure being published, so I can't say which one would be better for plants. The key is just be careful of what the animals are being fed in terms of where you're sourcing the manure. Look at the diets of the animals so that it influences to a great degree the quality of the manure, because a lot of what they eat passes out in the feces, all right? The animal's gonna digest, they're gonna utilize some, but that which cannot be utilized comes out in the feces. So if you're feeding something that may not be what you desire for human consumption, bet you it's going to be coming out in the manure. And if your plants are going to be utilizing that manure, it gets into your plants, and that is how the cycle goes. All right. All right, Ms. Josephine.
All right.
Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. We have one question from Ms. Bailey, and I think that'll be the last question because we have a next presentation after.
All right.
All right.
All right. Thanks so much. My question is on the manure. Now, I got some manure from a friend about a year ago. It was cured. I applied it to the plants, but a year after, the pellets are still kind of whole up top the plant. So a friend of mine told me that I should have grubbed it down before I applied it to the plants. Is that the best practice, or does a normal sheep and goat manure break down when you apply it to the plants?
The good thanks for that. The good thing about when you use the manure, it's always good to mix the manure in your soil, and not just leave it at the base or at the surface. All right. Mix it in, mix it up in the hole in whichever you're going to plant the whatever plant you're going to use, and it's going to give you. I think you could better capture a better utilization by mixing it with the soil. Left alone, maybe it's going to break down slowly over time. All right. So the best bet is to always mix it like a concoction. Turn it up, mix it together with the soil, so that you have some contact between soil, manure, and roots, rather than on the surface. Because if it stays on the surface, it would be more as the plant, people would be slow release, all right? And sometimes being on the surface there, it may attract certain things that you don't want it to attract. So for me, I would always encourage somebody to mix that manure and not just leave it by itself on the surface. All right. What another thing that people could utilize that is quite readily used that some people are now buying onto is the manure from rabbits. If you have somebody who is into rabbit production, that is one manure that could be used directly. It could be applied directly to the soil, or it doesn't need that whole curing, as it were. So it's something that you could explore. But when you have manure, don't just leave it to the top, mix it with your soil, and so you get a better effect when you mix it like that. All right?
All right, thanks. I'm seeing one more question here. But I guess you want to answer that, or how long would I leave manure to cure before use?
All right,
it has to be well composted.
For Dr. Isaac. that would be for more the crop persons.
Yeah, it has to be well composted. So you put it as part of your compost pile and you allow it to break down. And remember, we went through that in class some weeks ago. You have to take a temperature and make sure it reaches a certain temperature before, and then you will know if it's cured or not. All right, so just go through your notes again. All right, Brother Andell, it was so nice hearing from you this morning. We got more than we bargained for. We didn't expect to get so much information in such a short space of time. But we were all thrilled. I seen somebody here saying they have tortoises, like they wanted to know about.
Well, I guess that would, can we use their money? All right. All right, the thing I love about, the good thing about the manure, well, tortoises, well, that's an interesting, that would depend again on what you feed, because again, what is going to come out is what they consume, what you put in, a lot of what you put in, all right? Although you're going to have a lot of slough cells from within the animal itself, but I've never heard about the manure from the tortoise being used, all right? The verdict is still out there. Maybe some research needs to go into that, all right? But I'm glad that you are thinking about manure and that manure is contributing to your whole planting, all right? I'm seeing vegetable skins. Why not? The feces that you're gonna get, the manure is gonna bring you a lot of nitrogen, a lot of things that could be mixed again. Again, the idea is to allow it to be properly broken down, properly dried, broken down, and you could use it. And who knows, maybe when you do that, if we start using the manure from the tortoise and you have responses, you could put something out there as the new nutrient for plant, your tortoise manure, right? So there are a lot of things out there that we have not yet discovered. I'm happy that I was able to share some of the info with you. Again, maybe in another seminar series, we may be able to delve further into a lot more of the things that we have available that we could use, all right? But God's richest blessings as you continue the series. I'm happy that I was a part of it. I urge you to be COVID-19 free, and I hope that you be responsible and you encourage others to be responsible, and that God is going to richly bless you as you continue to grow. Eat what you grow, and as you encourage others to eat what they grow. All right, we are living in serious times, and the good Lord is making ready to make an appearance, and we all ought to make sure that we are ready so that when he bursts the clouds of glory, we could go home to meet him with our families and our loved ones. All right?
Right, all right. Thank you for that, Simonet. Thank you for that, Simonet. Brother Edward, thanks again for your presentation. To the participants, if you all have further questions for Brother Andell, you all could always send it on the chat and I could correspond with him during the week and we will get back to you. All right, now I'm trying to hurry on a little bit because we have a next speaker who has a little bonus session for you all and he was patiently waiting all this time. You heard from him some weeks ago, that is Mr. Dexter Bristol. He's one of our chief technicians at the farm at the University Field Station, and he will be joining us now. Well, he was with us all the time, so he will be talking to us about some appropriate survival strategies that we could adopt for us to face this continuing time of trouble. All right, so let's turn over to Brother Bristol. Brother Bristol.
Good morning,
Bristol, are you
everyone.
there still?
Yes, I'm here. You hear me?
All right, okay.
Are you hearing me?
Thanks for your patience.
You're welcome. All right, let me share. I just have to go into the share screen, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Are you seeing the presentation?
Yes, we're seeing it.
Yeah, I can move this onto the. All right. Again, morning, everyone. And my short discussion this morning is on appropriate survival technologies. What do we mean by survival skills? Now I'm going to stick straight to the slides, right? Because of time, because I have something else to do right now, and I was hoping that I would have been presented a little earlier. Survival skill are techniques a person may use at dangerous situations. We know presently living in this world it seems that the world is becoming much dangerous. Even living in the urban places are even dangerous. So what we're basically talking about is things that you can save yourself from or others. Generally speaking, these techniques are meant to provide basic necessities for human life. Now, water, we need water, we need food, we need shelter, habitats, and the ability to think straight. You need to be able to think straight. Now, one of the ways you can think straight, I don't know if anybody realize, anybody have been maybe in cadets or things like that? And I was in cadets, and I used to ask myself some of the things we do in cadets, or like my brother who is a soldier, he will ask himself, why is he scrapping a gun and putting it back together, scrapping a gun, put it together? And there was situations where he had problems with the gun in the dark, and because of muscle memory, he can do it. So sometimes not only thinking straight, but to be able to do something repeatedly that they can actually do it through muscle memory. So the ability to think straight, to signal for help, to navigate safety, to provide, to avoid unpleasant interactions with animals and plants, and for first aid. Survival skills are often basic ideas and abilities that historically humans had to use for years. Survival skills, again, continue. Survival skills are often basic ideas, again, abilities that man have, invented and used for thousands of years. Outdoor activities, for example, those who like hiking, there's some preparation you have to do before you go hiking, backpacking, horseback riding, fishing. There's some things you need to have in order to fish, and hunting. All these require basic wilderness survival skills, especially when handling in emergency situations. So basic survival skills are having a first aid kit. Now, a first aid kit or a first aid kit can help a person to survive and function with injuries and illness that would otherwise kill or incapacitate him or her. For example, common things are like bites. I mean, a lot of us have gotten dog bite. Some people, unfortunately, would have gotten a snake bite, or will get sting. You could some of us have fractured a bone fracture, or you have gotten a burn, headache, heart attack, hemorrhage, food poisoning, or drinking, or getting, feeling sick after drinking non-potable water, sprain, particularly your ankle, wound which will may, which may become infected. So something we must note: a survivor may need to apply the content of the first aid kit, or if possessing the required knowledge, naturally occurring medicinal plans, immobilize injury and limb, or even transport the incapacitated comrade. So a survivor may have to do, to use the survival kit if he's the only person, alive, or may have to use it on himself, may have to tote somebody out of the woods, or use maybe sticks or some kind of thing to a broken leg to bandage a person before they get out for medical aid. Shelter. So some of the things, even in the wild, you may have to think about how you're going to build a shelter. But the thing about building a shelter, before building a structure, you must first consider your situation. Are you hearing me still? I just saw a signal come up. My internet was unstable. Your shelter should be able to protect you from excessive heat, cold, wind or rain, sun or any weather that is around you. Shelter is mainly for protection and comfort. Now, all these things I'm talking about here, anybody who's been in Master Guide, and I grew up as in church being a Master Guide. These things I'm talking about is similar things that you will do as an honor in a Master Guide, being a Master Guide. So shelter are mainly for protection and comfort. It can protect you against the weather, animals, or insects. It should be relatively comfortable because you must be able to sleep, which is a basic human need. Fire. Fire is important. One thing, even as a master, one thing I learned, you must be able to start a fire without even using matches or flint. Now we are modern, we have, a lot of things that we can use to make a fire, but making a fire is recognized as a source of a significant increase your ability to survive physically and mentally. In fact, this having a fire, the warmth from the fire will make you feel comfortable. It even remind you of being home, the warmness of home. It even gives you, you could, at least you can cook a meal, you can sterilize water, you can dry your clothes. So a lot of books on survival will talk about the importance of being able to make a fire. So fire making skills before venting the wilderness is very important. Producing a fire under adverse conditions can be made much easier by introducing of tools such as a solar spark lighter or a fire piston. But even these things, you should even try practicing being able to make a fire, before hard times come, or outside on the stove, to make a fire out in the air, things like that. It's important because if it comes to a time where we have to be away from our home and away from our stove, away from LPG gas, and we have to make a fire by using things that are dry right around us, we must be able to make a fire because making a fire is important. So fire present a tool as a tool meeting many survival needs. The heat provided by a fire warm the body, dry the clothes, disinfect water, and cook food. It cannot be overlooked, right? It boosts us in a physiological way. The sense of safety, and it gives us a sense of protection also. In the wild, the fire can provide a sensation of home, as I said earlier on, a focal point. In addition of being an essential energy source, fire may deter wild animals from interfering with the survival, right? However, wild animals may be attracted to light and the heat of the fire. Water. Now, it is said that the human body can live for the average of 3 to 5 days without intake of water. The issues presented by the need of water is delicate. And that's it's on the unnecessary water loss by perspiration be avoided in survival situation. Once we have movement, your body is going to build temperature and your body is going to try to cool itself by perspiration. The need for water increase with exercise or physical movement. So typically, a person will lose minimum of 2 to a maximum of 4 liters of water per day under ordinary condition, and more in a hot day or cold weather. 4 to 6 liters of water or another liter are generally required each day in the wilderness to avoid dehydration and to keep the body functioning properly. When the body don't have much water, a lot of things happen. Lethargy is something that happens. The lack of water, somehow signals can go to your brain and the body just don't function. People who lack water get headache, they feel dizzy, they're confused, and eventually death. Every mild dehydration, even mild dehydration, is dangerous in a survival situation where clear thinking is essential. Dark yellow brown urine is a self-diagnostic indicator for dehydration. To avoid dehydration, a high priority is typically assigned to allocating a supply of drinking water and making provision to render the water as safe as possible. You know the term potable water. Water that is safe for us to drink, water with minimum pathogen. You see that the diagram right below there? That's a simple diagram. If you can get a container, any container, that you can place a glass at an angle, any angle between like 10 degrees to 15 degrees to 45 degrees. You can place it on the shelter. This is a sectional view of an object you see in it. And the reason for that is that if you put a dark surface, if you paint the underneath black, or you line it with a black plastic bag and pour water in it, the dark surface is going to absorb heat. It's going to heat the water and the water is going to evaporate. And the evaporation of the water is going to go up to the glass on top, going to form a dew point, and it's going to form condensate. And the water is going to actually, you know, it's going to, because of the charge of the water, it's going to cling onto the glass and it's going to be flowing, even though it's under the glass, to the side. And you can actually drip into a glass, you know. In the case of the diagram, there's a glass beaker and you can collect. That water that collected it is going to be distilled water. That water is going to be pure, you know, it's going to be as potable water. It's not going to have any pathogen or anything in that water. Okay, water harvesting. This is something most of us in the Caribbean are familiar with. Most of us have lived in a house where from the roof there's guttering, and from the guttering there's a spouting or something to convey the water straight to a holding tank or water tank. So rainwater harvesting is collecting water from your roof. There's also other type of harvesting, right? And that harvesting is harvesting water from maybe from a stream of water, a pond. What again? From aquifer springs and things like that. But rainwater collecting is from a roof-like surface. So the rain comes on the roof and you direct the water straight to a tank or a cistern or a deep pit, a well or shaft or a blowhole. Aquifer or reservoir with percolation. Now, dew and fog can also be collected. Rainwater harvesting is different from what we call stormwater harvesting, which is runoff that is collected from, rainwater is from the roof and storm wall, or stormwater harvesting is rather from creek, drain, roads, and the storm water will be more or less have more pathogen. You can use that water, or it's more recommended to use that water to water garden. In terms of livestock, what we learned earlier on, you should give your livestock as pure water, as clean as what you will drink. For irrigation for plants, again, to me, because you're going to eat the plants, you should give the plants clean water also, right? So domestic use with proper treatments and heating. The harvesting of water can also be made committed to a longer term storage or groundwater discharge. Food, like root tuber, culinary root tuber, tube, edible, mushroom, nuts, edible, beans, edible, cereal, edible, moss, edible, kite and algae can be searched and if needed prepared almost by boiling. Now the thing about plants as compared to animals, plants don't run about the place. So if in the wild, the plants are basically stationary. So you can, if you know what plants you can eat, you don't have to have much tools to harvest plant food in the wild to eat. But with animals, even fish, you will have to have some measure of hook. You might have a bow, a snare, or a net in order to gather the animal. Right? So animal food in the wild includes animal will be by either get the animal by trapping them or hunting, or if you had a fish or use fish hook to collect fish. So again, navigation is important to know. Okay, if you're in the woods, if you get lost, it's important to know where possible north is, where south is, or where east and west is. So in a survival situation, finding a way to safety, you have to figure out a way how you're going to navigate. The more suitable location, you need to navigate for a more suitable allocation where you could wait to get rescue. So type of navigation, there is celestial. That's why as Master Guy said, Adventist, we were taught about the stars. If you know the stars well, you can figure out where north is, right? You can even use the sun, and the sun rise in the east and set in the west. So you can have an idea. If you know where east is and where west is, you can figure out where north is. The night sky to locate, cardinal direction and to maintain the course of travel using a map, compass. And today, in the modern time, we have GPS receivers. The problem with GPS receiver is that it needs at least 3 satellites to triangulate. So therefore, if you don't have 3 satellites or more, your triangulation, where you are or where you plan to go, you can be off by a lot of meters. That reckoning is the other way. It's a way that people at sea use to navigate. If perchance is daylight or the compass that they give trouble or the compass damage, and they have the last location, they can add and minus, I think it's 70 from the last figure they have. And once they know the nautical miles or how fast they're moving with the boat, they could figure out where they are. So natural navigation using conditions surrounding you, nature, like moss on a tree. One thing we learn in Master Guide, moss have a tendency of going on the northern side of the tree. But you have to be careful with that. Moss have a tendency of going where there's moisture. So using natural things like the stars and the sun rising might be more accurate. But also, the way the sun is rising again, some moss, if they have moisture, will tend to be on the eastern side to collect sunlight. Okay? So direction of moving water. I mean, if you know what side of the mountain you are on, and naturally where the mountain is located to the populated area that you came from. Like in Trinidad, we have a northern range, a central range, and a southern range. Most of our river comes from the northern range. So if it's coming from, if it's running, you know that it's running away. So it's moving from north to a south. So it's easy to just look at the river and watch where the river running in Trinidad and know that follow the river, you're going in a southerly direction. Having a survival kit at hand. Often, survival practitioner will carry with them a survival kit. This consists of various items which are useful for a short duration in the wilderness. Supplies in a survival kit normally contain items such as a sharp knife, such as a Swiss Army knife, matches, easy form of making a fire, starting a fire, a first aid kit, a fish hook, right? A sewing kit, and also lead flashlight. Survival kit contents food, warm water, emergency water pouch. You must have some container that they can put water in. You see, like how we discovered earlier on a way that you can distill the water. You want something to collect the water, so as you're moving the water. A calorie bar, some high energy bar you must have in case you reach in a situation where you run out of food, your body will need energy so you can get up and move. Body warmers, emergency blanket, raincoat, light, safety, and miscellaneous. Light stick, something that you can, it has those chemical sticks in plastic that you can just bend it, and when the chemical, when a glass break and the chemical makes it glow, it glows in the dark. You need flashlight. You need extra batteries. You need mask, emergencies, emergency radio, utility knife, right? Duct tape. Duct tape is very useful. There are cases where you don't have to tie something. You can stick a broken leg. You can duct tape around it and stick it together. Rope, gas lighter, razor to cut things, soap for sanitizing your hand, toilet paper, right? Trash bag. Mental preparedness. Most survivor from any disaster must have a mental state of mind. Some about a year ago in Trinidad, we had a flash flood in Greenville, where a flood of water just came in. And in less than 2 hours, people's houses flooded nearly 3 meters in height. So people had to climb on top of the table, even climb up into the ceiling, even take out galvanize. And this hearing people coming out that obviously people had some form of mental preparedness so that they could figure out how they're going to navigate, how they're going to remove themselves, even the babies and the children, off from the ground and being cool, because people is whole. I mean, with that flash flood, it lasts over the night. Even in the morning, it had water in Greenville, so people could have, of just being extremely cold, could have died. The will to live is a life and death situation is often separated by those that live and those that do not. Stories of heroic fleet and survivals by regular people with little or no training, but a strong will to live are not uncommon. The key thing. So having a mental, I will live through this. I will make it to safety. I mean, up to last year, I was watching a movie where there was an explosion and people went, buried under the ground. And, one person said, they saw a piece of iron and they were knocking against a beam. And by knocking that beam, hoping that the beam, someone will pass close to the beam outside while they're looking for them, rescuers, that they will feel the vibration of the beam. So you have to have a mental preparedness, think about the basic physical life, what you can do, how things you can vibrate that people can figure out where you are. situation can be, stressful, right? To the level that even a trained expert may be mentally affected. So having a mental preparedness of mind is important. Mental preparedness continue to the extent that stress results from testing human limit. The benefit of learning to function under stress is determined by those limited limits may be outweighed to the downside of stress. Remember earlier I talked about being in college, being in the army, my brother, in terms of muscle memory. That's the other part of mental preparedness. You have to practice a certain behavior, like being home in your house, having create a disaster moment. How are we gonna vacate the house in an orderly fashion? How are we gonna act in case of an earthquake? What are we gonna do? So you gotta create little panic moments in the house that can create situation where we can protect ourselves, getting yourself in the fetal position, things like that. There are certain strategies and mental tools that can help people cope better under survival situation, including focusing on managing the task right in front of them, having a plan B available, and recognizing your denial. So recognizing the situation, recognizing, your shortcoming is important. Again, just thinking of making a fire and even trying to order fire or trying to add green stuff into the fire that will cause, vegetation into the fire that will cause a lot of smoke. Well, if people looking for you, they will see that smoke. So the things. So you have to be thinking, mental preparedness. When disasters strike, will you be prepared? Natural disasters as flash flood, fire, storm, just to name a few, are frequently mentioned in survival training. Man-made disaster like terror attack or COVID are also taking place among, in training. These training are really important because their roles in leading people to safety, but also, involve risk. With these tips, you can be assured to lessen tasks or eventually make your survival skills, during disaster more effective or more efficient. So when disasters strike, are you prepared? Mitigation is all you need to be prepared. The term means knowing and avoiding risk, especially when disasters strike. It is also include assessments of possible risks. Next is the preparedness that help you to focus and to aim the aim of safety by using possible and right equipment during a disaster. By remembering these factors will help you to avoid panic and to start initiative. So again, as I say, thinking things, if you practice this thing often enough, even at home, it will become organic, or it's like muscle memory if in a disaster situation. So creating, like what fire drill you're gonna put in your house. Do you have fire escape in your house? If you live in, like for example, a lot of us live in a story up or 2 stories up, and a lot of the government buildings, even in Trinidad, I can tell you about Trinidad, a lot of the government buildings don't have fire escape. Do you have a sheet that you tie nuts on that you can throw out a back window that in case there's a fire that you get a story above you that you can get out of the building safely? Or if there's a fire, under you on the other side of the building that you can throw this sheet and tie it on, on some burglar proof, so you can get out of the building on the other side for safety. Right? So, thanks. Is there any questions? That's the end of our discussion this morning.
Thank you, Brother Bristol. I know you talk about the equipment just now, and the other document I shared with you was supposed to be all the equipment, but we will share that with them on the Google Classroom.
Yeah, no problem.
You want to talk about that, the handout?
Well, I only look at it this morning, Wendy, and
all right, okay.
Before the other time, or we can share it with them.
Yeah, we will share it with them. We will share it with them because what it does, it outlines a number of different technologies that you could use, little things that you could do around the home to prepare yourself for any disaster that may strike. All right. Like for example, sterilizing water. Do you know you could sterilize water using the seeds of moringa? Right? So it outlines different techniques you could use, simple techniques, and to improve your living standards when there's a disaster. All right, so are there any questions? Because I saw that we have in the chat, somebody said that they are a cadet officer, and then we have Brother Oliver, who is this morning he had to go and teach his pathfinders how to make nuts. That is our next survival strategy. Right? So, and do we have any questions for Brother Bristol?
Just a quick comment. I noticed that these days, lots of individuals are doing the burglar proofing against, vandals, but at the same time, we're not making provision for escape. Your advice on how we mix that.
Okay. Now, I inherit a government house, and there's burglar proof in all the windows. So what I did when I moved in, I cut at least most of the exits in the house. The kitchen is on the northwestern side of the house, and to enter the house in the living room from the patio is on the northern side of the house. So what I decided, I cut windows, the burglar proof, and just put a padlock and keys, easily that you can get to unlock that burglar proof. So I put a hinge system on the burglar proof that I can get out, and I put it on the eastern side and also the southern side of the house. So I have two other places I can exit. If there's a fire in the kitchen, it's difficult for me to exit my house through the living room, because the kitchen is the northeastern side and the living room is the northern side. So it's better I leave from the eastern side, from one of the eastern bedroom, or in the master bedroom on the southern side of the house. So there's those simple things. You can look at your burglar proof, you can cut it, and you can weld it back using a hinge system. I hope that helps. I'll answer your question.
Thank you very much. Yes. Thank you very much.
I have a question. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead, sister.
Yes, this is Sister Wilson, Gladys. We are presently in Guyana, and we are not here usually all year. COVID has kept us here for this time. It's a very high house. It's a huge house. And we have one door to the exterior. But each room, the kitchen goes out the door, and each room is closed off. We're making this it's difficult to trust fast. But in our master bedroom, we have a balcony that leads to another roof. And sometimes I look there and I say, look, we have fire alarm systems and so on. But if anything should happen on our home in St. Martin that has 3 doors, how would we get down quickly? Because I have a broken femur. I had surgery last year. So I sometimes think about it. And I'm not as agile as before, so I'm thinking about in case of emergency, you know, how we would manage that. I think about it because knowing about survival skills and so on, we have 3 doors and we always had a drill on how to get out in case of anything. But with this situation here, because we're not here often, we have to secure it. We have no windows downstairs, and the house is very high. It's like a 3-story. Yes, that's 22 treaders down. So I am wondering.
Can I make a comment?
Go ahead, go ahead.
Good day, everybody. Well, to you, my dear, consider moving downstairs to start with. I think because of your challenges, you might be better advised. No,
I was thinking about that, but downstairs.
You have to remodify downstairs.
I was thinking about that, but we didn't build any windows on the downstairs. So
well, then you
I
have
want
to
to know if it's to cut windows, if it compromise the structure.
No, but I mean, okay, I live, my house have 18 treaders to upstairs. I am a blind person. I mean, I'm 62 and counting. And I am considering now fixing up downstairs to go and live downstairs and rent out upstairs to a younger people with less noise. But I think that is one of the, because even if you build windows, to get through those windows might be another headache. So the long-term process is to build downstairs. And before we go any further, I just want to tell everybody that a COVID update, we have 519 cases in Trinidad, 11 deaths, and that's the latest.
Wow, thanks for that information.
Thank you very much, sir. I will have to get in consultation with my husband and son.
Right. My recommendation would be same as Mr. Prasad, that you move downstairs, or if possible, I mean the only their vehicles, the aeroplanes have systems to people that are not that mobile to cater for them, and those are inflated sleds to vacate the plane as quickly as possible. If you can get some like that.
If she don't want to move downstairs, there are also chair steps.
Chair steps.
Chairs that can go up and down the steps, but that's a costly exercise.
Yeah.
Because I priced one here in Trinidad and it was almost $50,000 TT to install. You understand? But if you can't and don't want to move downstairs, that's the other alternative. An elevator may be out of the thing because of the fact the way the house is built. So you have to. You see, a lot of us build houses then, not realizing that now we may need to
get old.
Yep.
Well, you see it, I didn't see it.
No, well, I'm a young 70-year-old, but it's just broken leg has caused me to be mobile, kind of.
Yeah, well, and that's expected.
Yes.
But you have some options: put in a chairlift, or come downstairs, or go downstairs.
Yes, because I love living in Guyana. You know, I love St. Martin's. St. Martin's, I have a bedroom with a door that leads outside and just 2 treaders. So it's easy to get out. But I usually think about it. Thanks a lot.
No problem.
Any other burning question? Well, thank you so much, Mr. Bristol. Ms. Green wanted to say some things to you and to Andell, if she's still there with us. Ms. Green, by the way, welcome back. Last week we missed you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, guys, for the prayers.
Yeah, folks, I just want you all to know that Ms. Green, her birthday is this week. so we could wish a happy birthday in advance.
Yes. You all can sing me a song.
Okay, happy birthday.
Thank you, thank you.
Happy birthday, Miss Green. Happy birthday, God's blessings.
Thank you kindly. Thank you so much for the prayers last week. God did answer you guys' prayer. I felt myself getting better, so thank you so much. 52 persons praying for you. You have to get better. All right, so do I go ahead now and give the thanks?
You go ahead. You go ahead. Yeah.
So for Mr. Brother Dexter Bristol, no, Andell Edward, sorry. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was thorough. You did give us a lot of practical examples. And from your examples, it taught us that in the Caribbean, we're really blessed. It brought us back to childhood of how we enjoyed being outside and interacting with the outside environment. And a reminder for us as adults and a reminder for parents to continue to give children that type of interaction instead of more time, in the home, possibly on tablets, and even showing us how when you were growing up, you had to have a sheep or goat to take care of. It's also a reminder that children need responsibility, because all of that is part of raising a child in the way that God wants us to. So thank you very much for that. And Mr. Dexter Bristol, thank you so much for holding on to your seat and staying in your seat so that you could share with us these timely survival skills. Because in the time that we are living now and in the time that is going to come upon us, we really need to have these skills ready in order to make it through. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Now, so this brings us to the end of our lectures. We had 2 months of lectures, very informative sessions from all our presenters, and it will end on the 30th with our graduation. Last week, Sister Henry, she gave us a little overview of what to expect for the graduation. And during the week, I sent forward the information for you all to